Hi guys. Tonight we set out together across a cold and endless wilderness. The air is sharp, and every breath turns to mist before your face. The light of the setting sun fades behind you, and ahead lies only forest, river, and silence. You can almost hear the crunch of your boots on frozen ground, the faint rattle of the wagon wheels behind, and the sigh of wind through the bare trees. It is the late 1700s, maybe the early 1800s, and you are stepping into a new world that does not care whether you survive. You probably will not, at least not without learning very fast. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights and let's begin. You trudge westward along a muddy trail that was once an animal path. The map in your head is half imagination and half rumor. Somewhere beyond these hills, you've been told, the soil is black as coal and rich as chocolate cake. But tonight, all you have is the sound of the wind and a wagon filled with a few tools, a few dreams, and some salted pork wrapped in cloth. Your fingers are stiff, and the cold creeps into your bones. You realize that the first challenge is not farming or trading or building a church. It is just staying alive until morning. That was the truth for almost every early settler who crossed into the American frontier. People left New England towns or European ports chasing independence and fertile land, yet many met their first winter unprepared. Historians still debate whether these first groups understood what they were facing. Some argue they were seasoned woodsmen. Others say they were city folk with romantic notions about nature. Either way, that first winter stripped all illusions. The wilderness was not a painting. It was a test. You make camp near a stream. The horses snort and paw the frozen earth. You gather what little dry wood you can find and strike a spark from your flint. The fire catches, weak at first, then brightens until shadows dance along the trunks of ancient pines. The smell of smoke is both a comfort and a warning. Fire means warmth, but it also means attention. Every predator for miles knows you are here. Some pioneers believed in building a traveler's cross before bedding down, stacking small sticks into a crude shape as a charm against wolves and spirits. There are stories of settlers hearing footsteps outside their camp, too light to be a bear, too soft to be a man. You tell yourself it's just the wind. Still, your hand finds the handle of the hatchet at your side. The night deepens. The temperature drops below freezing. Frost forms on your beard and lashes. You roll into a thin blanket, still wearing your boots, and stare at the stars. They look closer than they ever did back east, glittering so fiercely that you half expect them to fall. You think of home, of family, and of the promise that drew you here. Land of your own, freedom to build, a future shaped by your own two hands. Somewhere in the dark, an owl calls. The sound echoes like a question. Did you make the right choice? There is no answer yet. There is only the slow crack of your firewood and the distant groan of the trees shifting in the wind. By morning, you wake stiff and sore. The fire has burned to ash. A thin layer of ice glistens on the inside of your blanket. You rub your hands together and stare at the forest, realizing that every tree around you might one day be a wall, a roof beam, or a door. You will have to learn which wood splits clean, which resists rot, which bends and warps in the cold. You will have to learn how to fell a tree safely without crushing yourself beneath it. A mainstream historical record from the 1790 seconds describes these first crossings into the frontier as an exodus of farmers and carpenters overnight. That line makes you smile now. You do not feel like a carpenter. You feel like someone pretending to be one. Yet the moment you pick up that axe, you join a story older than the nation itself. There's a quirky tidbit that some pioneers named their axes, carving initials or small symbols into the wooden handle for luck. You run your thumb along the smooth hickory and think of giving it a name, though none comes to mind yet, maybe after it saves your life a few times. You start to understand that the wilderness is not simply a place, it is a personality. Sometimes it feels generous, letting you find dry wood and easy kindling. Sometimes it's cruel, snapping the handle of your saw or soaking your boots in ice water, but it always demands respect. By evening, you've scouted a ridge near a bend in the river. There's flat land for a cabin, a stream for water, and thick pine woods that will block some of the wind. It is not much, but it is enough. You drive a stake into the ground, marking the spot that will become your home. The sun sets behind you, spilling gold over the treetops. You stand there for a long while, letting your breath rise in pale clouds, trying to imagine a cabin where there is now only emptiness. The air smells of sap and snow. You feel the first flakes begin to fall, gentle and slow, whispering on your shoulders like a warning. Winter is coming fast. Every hour will count now. You pull your coat tighter and walk back to the campfire. As the flames rise again, you hold your hands close, staring into the embers. You can already picture it. Smoke curling from a chimney, a door that shuts out the wind, warmth waiting inside. But that is still a dream. For now, the stars are your roof, and the forest is your wall. You listen to the quiet, knowing that the story of survival has only just begun. You wake to the sound of birds pecking through frost, the kind that pierces the quiet just before dawn. Your breath fogs in the air as you stretch your stiff legs and look around. The fire has died to a dull red glow, and the ground beneath you feels like stone. It's time to choose where you will build. Shelter will not build itself, and winter does not forgive hesitation. Choosing the ground is not just about where you want to sleep, it's about whether you want to live. You walk along the ridge, boots crunching through thin snow, studying the slope and the shape of the land. The pioneers learned fast that beauty did not mean safety. A meadow might look perfect, but one heavy rain could turn it into a swamp. A low valley might seem calm until the river floods and drowns your stores of grain. You pause near a patch of tall pines and listen to the wind's direction. If you can hear it whistling through your ears now, imagine what it will do in January. You shift your gaze to a small rise near a stream. The soil there looks firm, the ground dry, and the trees thick enough to block northern gusts. That feels promising. A mainstream historical record from an 1802 settler's guide advised, "Build where water is near but not at your feet." You smile at that advice. It sounds simple, but it hides the hard-earned lessons of men and women who learned too late what freezing runoff could do to their doorstep. As you kneel and press your hand to the earth, the cold seeps through your glove. The soil is dense but workable. You draw a crude outline with a stick, marking corners and walls that exist only in your imagination. You can almost see it, a rough cabin of pine logs, smoke curling from a hole in the roof, your own hearth glowing through the frost. Still, every decision feels like a gamble. Historians still argue whether settlers chose high ground out of knowledge or luck. Some say it was trial and error. Others believe indigenous guides taught many of them where the soil drained best and where the frost hit last. You'll never know exactly which of those theories is true, but you can feel the truth in your bones. If the ground beneath you holds, so might your future. You take a slow breath and smell pine resin and cold earth. The forest hums with small noises, a squirrel rustling, a crow cawing somewhere unseen. You remember that you're not the first to set foot here. Long before wagons rolled across this frontier, Native peoples had chosen these same ridges for their camps. Some left stone hearths, others faint mounds of earth. You try not to disturb them. A few pioneers swore bad luck followed those who built over old burial sites. Whether you believe it or not, respect feels like a safer choice. You move toward the river, breaking thin sheets of ice with your boot. The water runs clear and cold. It's good water, not stagnant or muddy. You fill your tin cup and sip carefully, wincing at the chill. The taste is sharp, almost metallic, but clean. You picture how this river will serve you through the year. Water for cooking, washing, even turning a small mill one day if you live long enough to build one. A quirky fact that makes you chuckle comes to mind. Some settlers in the Ohio Valley once tested their new water sources by dropping in a live fish. If it survived the night, they considered the water safe. If it didn't, they moved on. You have no fish to spare, but you like the idea of letting nature be your tester. You walk back toward your stake and notice the light shifting through the trees. The frost glimmers like powdered glass. Each beam of sun feels like hope, fleeting but real. You start marking trees that will have to fall first. Your axe feels heavy but dependable, its iron head catching the morning light. This is how it begins. You stop for a moment and simply listen. The forest around you has a rhythm, almost like breathing. The trees creak, the river murmurs, and every sound feels older than you can imagine. You realize how small you are, standing here with one axe and a dream of a roof. It humbles you, but it also stirs something fierce inside. By midday, you have marked a rough square of land, maybe 20 by 20 feet. It will not be grand, but it will be yours. You scrape the snow aside to reveal the brown soil, then scatter a handful of pebbles where the hearth might stand. The act feels ceremonial, though you don't quite know why. Perhaps it's the first true sign that this place will become a home. As you rest your arms, you think of the others who made the same choice before you. Families who carried infants through forests, who buried children beside cabins that no longer stand. The weight of that history settles over you like a blanket. It is both sad and comforting. You are part of something much larger than yourself. You find yourself talking aloud, half to the trees, half to the wind. You say, "All right then, this will do." The words hang in the air, simple but final. The decision feels good. You know the ground is not perfect. The soil might freeze too deep. The spring might flood a little high. But at least you have chosen. And that act, that single moment of saying yes to the land, feels like a victory. You look toward the horizon. The sun sits low and golden, glinting off the frozen stream. The day is almost done. You feel hunger stirring in your stomach. Tonight, you'll eat what's left of your salted meat and maybe boil some cornmeal if you can keep the fire steady. Tomorrow, the real work begins. Before you turn back to camp, you kneel once more and press your hand into the cold soil. "Hold me," you whisper quietly, "and I'll hold you." The earth does not answer, but somehow it feels like it heard. As you walk back through the fading light, a sudden gust of wind carries the scent of wood smoke from your dying campfire. It smells like home, even though no home exists yet. You smile at the thought and quicken your pace. Tomorrow, you'll swing the axe. Tomorrow, the land will change shape beneath your hands. The cold deepens as twilight settles. You pull your coat tighter and look up at the stars blinking awake one by one. Somewhere out there, a wolf calls. The sound makes you shiver, but it also reminds you that you've made your first choice wisely. The ground beneath you will hold. You just have to prove that you can too. Morning arrives in a pale wash of light through the mist. The forest smells damp and alive, and your breath forms small clouds as you exhale. The time for imagining is over. Today, you must face your first night of real work. No cabin, no walls, just the open sky above your head. The day will be long, but it begins with a plan. You move quietly through the trees, scanning for fallen branches, dry bark, and any sign of shelter. A hollow tree would be a miracle, but the trunks here are solid and unyielding. You find instead a shallow rise near your marked ground, where the roots of an old oak have lifted the earth like a small ridge. It will have to do. You kneel, tracing the shape of the spot with your hand. The soil is frozen hard, but if you dig shallow trenches and build a simple windbreak, you might just make it through the night. Early settlers often did the same, creating makeshift lean-tos out of brush and fallen limbs before they could raise real walls. Some even slept beneath overturned wagons, the canvas top turned into a crude tent. Records from the early frontier mention how those first nights were a test of willpower. Many families simply froze before they ever built a roof. The diaries that survive speak in short sentences, clipped by exhaustion. We slept by the fire. The wolves howled. Snow began before dawn. It makes you wonder how many stories were never written at all. You gather branches and angle them against the trunk of a tree. Each one thuds softly as it falls into place. The rhythm is hypnotic. Your hands sting from the cold, and you pause to blow on your fingers, flexing them against the ache. You drape pine boughs across the frame, layering them until it feels like a real wall. The smell of sap fills your nose, sticky and sharp. The work is awkward, but strangely satisfying. The body warms through motion, and for a while, you forget the cold. You crouch to inspect your creation, a half shelter that leans against the forest like a tired companion. It is not pretty, but it will block the worst of the wind. You spread your blanket on the ground and line it with pine needles, hoping the soft layer will keep you off the frozen soil. An unusual piece of advice from an 1810 homesteader's journal comes to mind. The writer claimed that pioneers sometimes buried hot stones under their bedding to hold the warmth through the night. You decide to try it. You heat a few round stones near the fire until they glow faintly, then roll them into shallow holes and cover them with earth. The ground begins to steam. For a brief moment, the scent of warm soil fills the air, a strange comfort in the wilderness. You take a step back and study the scene. Smoke curls upward through the branches, blurring the line between ground and sky. The sound of crackling wood mingles with the soft hiss of snow melting near the fire. This is life reduced to its bare bones: wood, water, heat, and will. Experts continue to discuss how much survival in these first winters depended on knowledge versus sheer luck. Some pioneers had grown up chopping wood and hunting. Others came from towns where the hardest labor was drawing water from a well. It seems that those who lasted shared one trait above all else: the ability to adapt quickly. You can feel that truth in your own tired arms. The afternoon fades fast. By the time you finish stacking the last log, the forest glows blue with twilight. You add a few extra branches to your fire and sit close, letting the warmth creep through your boots. Your muscles throb, but you feel a quiet pride. You have made something. It is not much, but it stands between you and the dark. From the edge of your vision, a small movement catches your eye. A rabbit darts through the underbrush, its fur almost invisible against the snow. You watch it disappear into the shadows and smile. If it can live out here, so can you. An odd superstition from early trappers whispers through memory. They believed that if you saw a rabbit on your first day of building, your home would last through 7 winters. You do not know where you heard it, but you decide to believe it anyway. Faith, even in nonsense, has a strange way of keeping the cold away. As the night deepens, the fire crackles louder, a steady heartbeat against the silence. The wind sighs through the trees, tugging at your makeshift roof. You listen to its voice, half lullaby, half warning. You think about the people who will come after you, who will walk through these same woods and find only traces of what you built. Maybe a rusted axe head, maybe a circle of stones from your hearth. History often leaves behind such small clues. You stretch out on your bed of needles and stare up at the small patch of stars through the branches. The light wavers as smoke drifts past, soft and silver. The fire's warmth wraps around you, but you know it will not last. Every few hours, you'll have to wake and feed it again. Sleep will come in fragments, broken by the need to survive. Before you close your eyes, you whisper a quiet promise to yourself. Tomorrow you will fell your first tree. Tomorrow the work will truly begin. The forest creaks in reply, as if acknowledging your vow. Somewhere in the distance, ice cracks on the river like a slow drum beat. You breathe deeply and let the sound carry you into restless dreams of log walls and a roof that does not leak. The stars fade by degrees until only the fire's glow remains, pulsing gently against the snow. You turn once more on your bed, clutching your blanket tighter, and listen to the forest breathe around you. You made it through one more night. Out here, that is victory enough. The next morning greets you with a thin veil of mist rising from the river. The air smells of cold water and wood smoke. Your breath forms clouds that vanish as quickly as your warmth. The world feels both quiet and enormous, as if waiting to see whether you will dare to move again. Today is the day you meet your closest companion on the frontier, your tools. The axe gleams dully in your hand, its edge rough from travel. You study it the way a soldier might study his rifle. The handle is hickory, sanded smooth and slightly curved. The iron head is blackened and nicked with use. It is a simple object, but it holds your fate inside its weight. Alongside it rests a handsaw, a hammer, a few nails, and a single knife. These are the bones of civilization, the difference between a wanderer and a settler. Accounts from early pioneer journals describe these tool sets as the heart of a homestead. With an axe, you could clear land, shape beams, defend yourself, and cut firewood. With a saw, you could turn chaos into order. One old saying went, "The axe was father, the saw was mother. Without them, the family did not exist." You test the edge of your blade with your thumb. It bites just enough to draw a thin red line. The sting wakes you fully. You smile at the thought that pain can be proof of readiness. A few feet away, the first tree stands waiting. You swing once, and the sound echoes through the forest. The vibration shudders up your arm, through your shoulder, into your chest. You adjust your stance and swing again, rhythm building, muscles burning in the cold air. Chips of wood fly, pale and fragrant. Each cut leaves a wedge that deepens into the trunk like the marking of time. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow even though the air is freezing. The tree groans, bending ever so slightly. You take a few careful swings from the other side, aiming to guide the fall. The forest goes still, listening. Then, with a sharp crack that sounds almost like thunder, the trunk gives way and crashes to the ground. Snow leaps from the branches in a white burst. You stand there, panting, the silence after the fall louder than the sound itself. An old diary from 1798 notes that pioneers often felt both triumph and sorrow when felling their first tree. It meant progress, but it also meant cutting down what had stood for centuries. You feel that mix now. For a moment, you rest your hand on the rough bark and whisper a quiet thank you. The tree, in its way, has become your first ally. A curious bit of frontier folklore tells of woodsmen who buried an acorn in the stump of their first tree, believing that it repaid the forest for what they had taken. You find yourself searching your pockets for a seed, though you have none. You promise instead to plant one later when spring returns. As you cut branches and strip bark, the smell of pine resin fills the air, sticky and clean. Each stroke of your blade makes a sound like a sigh, long and even. You fall into rhythm, swinging, breathing, pausing, then swinging again. The work feels endless but strangely peaceful. Some researchers suggest that the settler's survival was tied not only to skill, but to the meditative calm of repetition. The mind could drift while the hands did their work. You think of how modern people chase that same quiet in other ways, but here it comes naturally, earned through sweat and rhythm. By midday, you have 2 trees down and stripped. Their logs lie ready, gleaming pale in the weak sunday. You run your hand along the smooth surface, feeling the grain that once reached toward the sky. These will be your walls soon. The thought fills you with both awe and dread. You sharpen your axe by the fire, grinding the blade against a whetstone. Sparks flicker in the light, small stars leaping from metal. The sound is steady, circular, soothing. Each pass makes the edge brighter. There's an intimacy to it, like tuning an instrument. Your axe must sing properly if it's going to keep you alive. You think about how people centuries from now might look at a single tool like this and see only simplicity. They will not feel the vibration in the hands, or smell the scent of sap and smoke, or understand that every groove in the handle holds a story of survival. As the sun dips, you arrange your logs beside the clearing. The forest glows amber for a moment before slipping into grey. You take a sip of cold water from your tin cup, the taste sharp and metallic. You sit back, legs aching, and watch the steam rise from your own skin. For the first time since you arrived, you feel capable. You have turned part of the wild into something shaped by your will. You chuckle softly, remembering a fragment of old humour passed around the settlements. The axe makes no friends, only blisters. The line feels true. Your hands are already raw, the skin split near your thumb. Still, the ache feels good. It is proof that you are changing, growing into the kind of person who can live here. Night falls quickly. You build a small fire beside your half-finished shelter and lean back against one of the felled logs. The forest around you hums with faint noises, an owl, the creak of freezing branches, the whisper of wind through the trees. The stars appear again, distant and calm. You glance at your tools lying beside you. Their shadows stretch long and dark across the snow. You feel a sudden fondness for them, as if they were alive. You imagine them whispering back, promising that if you use them wisely, they will not fail you. Tomorrow you will need to cut 10 more trees. After that, you will start stacking. But for now, the fire crackles softly, and the forest seems to breathe with you. You let your eyes drift shut, the handle of your axe resting across your knees like a loyal friend keeping watch. The cold air bites your cheeks before the sun even touches the treetops. You rise slowly, feeling every muscle protest from yesterday's work. The fire has gone out, leaving only a faint trace of smoke curling upward. Your breath becomes your only warmth for a moment as you stand, stretching your arms and listening to the quiet. Today you begin clearing the land, transforming the wilderness into something you can call your own. You pick up your axe again, its handle now familiar against your palm. Around you the forest is thick, tangled, and indifferent. Each tree seems to stand guard, watching you with patient defiance. You begin to mark which ones must fall first. The process is both practical and symbolic. Every swing of the blade cuts deeper into the idea that this is no longer wild. It is home in progress. Early settler accounts describe this stage as the hardest labor of all. Clearing timber was not just about chopping trees. It meant dragging stumps, splitting roots, and burning piles of brush that smoked for days. Some newcomers from Europe had never seen forests so dense, their trees packed so tightly that sunlight barely touched the ground. One diary from 1795 called it a green prison that must be opened by fire and sweat. You understand that now. You start with the smaller saplings, their thin trunks bowing before each strike. The rhythm returns quickly, that blend of thud and echo that feels like a heartbeat. You drag the fallen branches aside, stacking them in heaps that will later feed your fire or fortify your walls. The ground beneath your boots becomes uneven, scattered with chips and roots. The smell of freshly cut pine fills the clearing, sweet and resinous. You pause for a moment and just breathe it in. There is a strange joy in the scent of labor. The sun climbs higher, thin light filtering through your growing gap in the trees. Each new ray feels like a small victory. According to a frontier manual printed in 1811, the best way to claim land quickly was to make it unmistakably yours. Clearing trees, planting a few crops, and leaving signs of human effort ensured that no one could dispute your ownership. You glance at your patch of churned earth and feel a quiet satisfaction. The land is beginning to remember you. As you hack away at a stubborn root, your axe head strikes something solid. You dig with your hands and uncover a smooth stone, round and white like bone. For a moment, you wonder if it belonged to something older than your tools or even your people. Some pioneers believed that strange stones carried luck. Others swore they attracted misfortune. You decide to keep it, just in case it leans toward the first. Folklore from this region tells of settlers who whispered thanks to the trees they cut and apologized to the stumps they left behind. It sounds foolish at first, but as the day goes on, you start to understand. The forest takes effort to bend, and gratitude feels like part of the exchange. In the distance, you hear the echo of another axe. Someone else is out here. Maybe a neighbor, though you have yet to meet one. The sound reminds you that even in this emptiness, you are not completely alone. It is comforting and slightly eerie, like hearing an echo of your own determination. You pause for lunch, sitting on a fallen trunk. The salted pork tastes rough, but it fills your stomach. You drink cold river water and feel it sting your throat. The silence around you is vast, broken only by the soft hum of insects and the creak of a distant branch. You start to hum a tune without meaning to, some half-remembered song from the coast. Out here, even a kid voice sounds large. By afternoon, you've cleared a wide enough space to see the sky fully above you. The openness feels strange, almost too bright. The air smells of ash and sap. You build a small brush fire to burn what you cannot use, feeding it slowly as the smoke rises in thin grey ribbons. The flames twist and dance, and you catch yourself staring, mesmerized. Researchers today often point out how fire shaped early pioneer life as much as any tool. It was warmth, light, protection, and destruction all in one. You can see why. The crackling sound feels alive. The heat on your face, a reminder that you've won at least one small battle against the cold. The hours blur. The axe swings, the wood falls, the brush burns, sweat freezes on your skin, and blisters bloom across your palms. But when you finally stop to rest, the sight before you is worth every ache. The forest has opened. The sky feels wider. You can see the place where your cabin will stand without the interference of shadows. You think of an entry written by a woman who followed her husband into the wilds of Kentucky. She wrote that the first cleared patch of land looked like heaven, though it smelled of smoke and sore muscles. Her words echo what you feel now. Hardship mixed with pride, exhaustion softened by beauty. As evening falls, the wind shifts. The fire's smoke drifts sideways, carrying with it the scent of sap and charcoal. You sit on a log, watching the sparks rise and fade. They remind you of your own breath in the cold air, small bursts of warmth disappearing into the vast dark. You lean back, the axe resting across your lap, and listen to the forest beyond your clearing. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hoots once, low and steady. You imagine it watching you with silent curiosity. Maybe it has seen others like you come and go, dreamers trying to carve permanence from impermanence. When the fire burns low, you rake the coals into a glowing line and cover them lightly with ash. The ground radiates a faint warmth beneath you. You whisper to yourself, "Tomorrow I start stacking." The words feel heavy and hopeful all at once. The stars shimmer above, clear and sharp. You close your eyes, feeling the slow pulse of your heartbeat against the cold. Around you, the forest breathes again, no longer defiant, just quietly waiting for what you will build next. The air smells of resin and frost as dawn crawls over your clearing. A fine layer of ice covers everything, glittering like powdered glass in the pale light. You stand at the edge of your open space, surveying the fallen trees from yesterday. Their trunks lie in uneven rows, waiting to become walls. Today is the day you start stacking. Today, a dream begins to take physical shape. You run your fingers along the bark, tracing the lines of the grain. Each log is heavy, solid, and reluctant to move. You will need to trim them to length and carve their ends so they fit together without gaps. This is the craft of log building, an art passed along through imitation more than instruction. Few settlers ever wrote exact directions. They simply learned by watching and failing and trying again. Accounts from frontier carpenters note that every cabin told the story of its builder's hands. Some walls stood straight, others leaned slightly as if bowing to the wind. Perfection was rare, survival was enough. The technique of laying logs horizontally, each one notched at the corners to lock in place, came from a blend of European, native, and Scandinavian traditions. You smile at the thought that your rough work is part of that shared inheritance. You take up your axe and score shallow lines near each log end. The metal glints briefly in the light. With careful swings, you carve away small wedges, shaping a crude V. The chips fly, the sound sharp and rhythmic. It is slow work. Your breath fogs with every exhale, and sweat trickles down your neck despite the cold. After an hour, you manage to fit 2 logs together. They rest snugly, the corners biting just enough to hold. You kneel, testing the balance, and feel a small rush of pride. The cabin is still only a dream, but it has found its first true edge. A curious observation from an 1808 settler's diary comes to mind. The writer compared his first cabin to a box of faith, built one mistake at a time. You understand that now. Every cut feels like a conversation with wood that refuses to cooperate. You adjust, you compromise, you learn to read its grain-like language. As you work, your hands grow sore. Blisters have split open from yesterday's labor, but you wrap them in strips of cloth and keep going. You hum quietly, the rhythm helping your muscles forget their pain. The sound of your own voice feels grounding, a reminder that you are still human inside all this wilderness. Scholars examining early building patterns still puzzle over how quickly these cabins went up. Some records claim a family could raise a 4-wall shelter in just 3 days. Others argue it took weeks of hauling, cutting, and sealing gaps with clay or moss. You suspect both are true depending on who swung the axe and how desperate they were for a roof. The afternoon light slants golden through the trees. You stop to eat, chewing tough jerky and sipping cold water. Every bite tastes of smoke and salt. When you look up, your walls are already 3 logs high on one side. The space feels smaller, warmer, more defined. You can almost imagine standing inside it. You notice how sound changes within the half-built walls. The wind softens. The echo of your tools becomes muted, contained. It feels like the forest itself is allowing you a small pocket of peace. A lesser-known custom from the Appalachian settlers said that builders would bury a coin beneath the first corner log for luck. Some used silver, others copper, believing the metal would attract prosperity or at least keep lightning away. You decide to press your lucky stone into the corner trench instead. It is small, white and smooth, a promise between you and the land. By mid-afternoon, your body aches from lifting and rolling logs. You move with slow precision, aligning corners, packing moss and damp clay into the cracks. The mixture squishes under your fingers, cold and gritty, but it feels good to know that it keeps the wind from slicing through. Experts on frontier life still discuss how these cabins reflected both ingenuity and desperation. With no nails to spare, every log had to interlock perfectly. One wrong angle could make a wall collapse under its own weight. The simplicity was deceptive. What looked crude from a distance was in fact a triumph of practical geometry. The sky fades toward dusk again. You have built up to shoulder height on 2 sides. The unfinished gaps look like windows into the wilderness beyond. You step inside the outline, your boots sinking into the churned earth. The air feels different here, quieter, like standing inside a heartbeat. You picture a small table against one wall, a cot near the hearth, perhaps a shelf where you might one day rest a book or a cup. You lean your axe against a stump and stretch your arms, the joints popping like dry twigs. For a moment you simply stand there, breathing slowly, admiring what you've done. The cabin may be rough, but it is undeniably yours. A traveler passing through might see only a pile of logs, but to you, it is the beginning of belonging. Each beam represents hours of motion, sweat, and stubbornness. The smell of clay and wood mixes with the faint tang of smoke from your nearby fire. It is the scent of effort turning into permanence. As darkness deepens, you toss a few branches onto the flames. Sparks spiral upward, carried into the night. The glow flickers against the raw wood, turning it amber and alive. You crouch near the fire, rubbing your aching shoulders, and look up through the trees. The stars shimmer faintly, mirrored in your eyes. You whisper to yourself, "It's standing." The words feel strange, almost unreal. The forest answers with quiet acceptance, its wind soft through the pines. You smile, tired and content, and let the sound of crackling wood lull you towards sleep. The morning begins with a low sky and the smell of wet earth. The forest seems quieter now, subdued by your progress. You stand beside your half-built walls, examining the seams between the logs. Thin ribbons of mist cling to the gaps, marking where the wind still finds its way through. Today you will seal them, closing the cracks that stand between warmth and frostbite. You gather moss from the north side of nearby trees, the green strands damp and soft between your fingers. The pioneers called this work chinking. It was tedious, dirty, and absolutely necessary. You mix the moss with handfuls of clay and damp soil, kneading it like bread until it forms a heavy paste. The smell is earthy, cool, and ancient. Historical building manuals from the 1822 mention this step as the moment a cabin became truly livable. Without it, the wind could whistle straight through the walls, chilling sleepers to the bone. With it, the logs held their warmth, and the fire finally made sense. You can imagine the relief when that first gust stayed outside, instead of finding its way in. You pack the clay mixture into each crevice, pushing it deep with your fingers. It squishes cold against your skin. Your gloves, stiff from frost, quickly become useless, so you toss them aside and work barehanded. The mixture dries fast, forming dull streaks that harden like stone. As the wall darkens, it begins to look solid, like something that belongs to the earth rather than sitting upon it. A peculiar detail from one settler's letter comes to mind. He wrote that some families used animal hair, straw, or even shredded cloth instead of moss. One woman reportedly sacrificed her only quilt to keep her cabin airtight. You smile softly, imagining her tearing fabric with quiet determination while snow fell outside. You move from corner to corner, pressing, smoothing, pressing again. The work is steady and grounding. Each motion feels like sealing away a little more of your fear. When you pause to stretch your back, you notice how the cabin's scent has changed. The mix of pine, clay, and damp earth creates something entirely new, a fragrance that smells like effort turning into safety. Some historians suggest that these small details of construction shaped the pioneers' psychology. The act of sealing gaps was not just physical labor but also symbolic. You were closing off the chaos of nature and defining the boundaries of your own life. Standing here with clay-stained hands, you can feel that truth sink in. A gust of wind blows through the clearing, testing your work. The air hums softly against the logs but no longer whistles through. You grin in triumph. The forest can still watch, but it cannot enter. Not easily. You take a break and sit near your fire, eating a piece of bread gone tough from the cold. The sound of cracking wood mixes with the rustle of branches above. You find yourself thinking about how simple materials, mud, moss, and wood, can mean the difference between death and survival. There is a certain poetry in that simplicity. Later in the day, as the light fades, you begin notching the remaining corner logs. The axe feels heavier now, but your muscles work with practiced rhythm. Each strike feels more confident than the last. You begin to trust your own precision. The pattern of cuts, the timing, the steady breathing, it all starts to feel like music played on a wooden instrument. In a letter from a Swedish immigrant preserved in a regional archive, he described his first cabin as a rough song in timber and clay. The phrase makes you smile. You think of your own structure as that same kind of song, a melody of survival, sung with calloused hands instead of a voice. The sky turns a dusky violet as you step back to look at what you have made. The gaps are sealed, the corners tight, and the lines of the cabin clean and purposeful. You brush your hands together, feeling the crusted clay crumble away. For the first time, the place looks like a home rather than a pile of ambition. Before you settle for the evening, you circle the cabin once more, checking for weak spots. You find one small opening near the base of a wall where the clay has cracked. Kneeling, you fix it quickly. As you press the mixture into place, a frog stirs from beneath a root, startled by your touch. You laugh quietly, half apologizing as it hops away into the underbrush. Folklore from some frontier families held that animals living under the cabin brought luck, especially if they stayed through winter. Maybe that little frog is your first tenant. You decide to leave it be, a quiet guardian of the ground. You stand again, stretching your sore shoulders, and look up at the stars beginning to appear through the tree branches. The cold deepens, but your spirit feels warmer. You have walls now, walls that hold the promise of light and safety. As you settle by the fire, the logs crack and spark. The shadows of your cabin dance on the snow like old spirits celebrating. You wrap your blanket tighter around yourself and whisper into the night, "It's holding." The forest answers only with a soft sigh of wind through pine needles. It feels almost like approval. You smile faintly, your eyelids heavy, the ache in your muscles fading into a quiet hum. Tomorrow, the roof. But tonight, you rest inside the sound of something real beginning to last. The morning air smells like frozen bark and ash from the dying fire. Your cabin walls stand silent, solid, and bare against the pale light. They wait for a roof, the final barrier between you and the sky. You can feel the season turning with each breath. The nights have grown sharper, the ground harder, the river thinner beneath its glaze of ice. If you do not finish the roof soon, snow will fall inside your home before you ever sleep beneath it. You kneel beside your pile of leftover logs and smaller branches, sorting through them by size. Some are too thick, others too curved. You will need lighter timbers for beams, something straight enough to span the width of the cabin. You run your hands along a few lengths of pine and choose the best among them. Records from early builders describe this stage as both the most dangerous and the most satisfying. The beams were heavy, awkward, and often raised with no more than rope and hope. Yet once they locked into place, the structure finally felt real. One letter written in 1807 tells of a man who called his finished roof a lid against the heavens. You like that phrase. It feels both humble and triumphant. You haul one beam across the clearing, dragging it by a rope looped around your shoulders. The sound of it scraping over the frozen ground echoes through the trees. When you reach the cabin, you lift one end against the wall and wedge it into a notch. The effort makes your arms tremble, but slowly, the log rises into position. You rest for a moment, breathing hard, feeling the weight of progress. A lesser-known practice among settlers was to name the first roof beam before setting it. Some carved initials or small crosses into the wood for luck. Others whispered short prayers or even sang, believing the sound would seal good fortune into the timber. You decide to hum a low tune, something half remembered from childhood, letting the vibration steady your breath as you lift. After a few strained minutes, the beam settles into place with a dull thud. The noise rings out like a small victory. You stand beneath it, grinning despite your sweat, and imagine the roof taking shape above your head. The cabin no longer feels open and vulnerable. It feels alive. Modern researchers who have studied surviving log cabins note how every detail reflected improvisation. Some roofs were flat and layered with bark, others steep with split shingles or bundles of straw. The materials depended entirely on what the land offered. You decide to try a shingle style, splitting narrow planks from leftover wood. The work is repetitive, the sound of your hatchet biting into pine, creating a steady rhythm that matches your heartbeat. As you work, you catch faint movement at the edge of the clearing. A deer stands half hidden among the trees, watching quietly. Its breath plumes in the cold air. You pause, meeting its gaze. For a moment, the world feels still. Then it turns and slips away without a sound. You smile. Maybe it approves of your craftsmanship. You climb the wall carefully, balancing on the lower beams, your boots scraping the rough bark. The view from above is dizzying and beautiful. The forest stretches endlessly, a frozen sea of green and silver. Smoke curls lazily from your fire below. You feel both powerful and fragile standing up here, part of something larger than you can name. You lay the shingles one by one, each overlapping the next. The smell of sap clings to your hands. The wind hums softly through the branches, brushing against your face like breath. You secure each piece with care, pressing it tight to keep the snow from slipping through. The repetition becomes hypnotic. Time feels slower, more deliberate. An entry from an early settler's journal mentions how builders sometimes raced storms to finish their roofs. "We nailed and prayed in turns," the man wrote, "and by God's mercy the snow began only after we lay the last plank." You glance up at the thickening sky and hope fortune grants you that same mercy. By afternoon, clouds gather in a dull grey blanket. You work faster now, fingers stiff, movements jerky. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of coming snow. You can almost hear it in the distance, that soft, endless whisper that precedes a storm. Your hands ache, but you refuse to stop. You drive the final shingle into place just as the first flakes begin to fall. Snow drifts slowly through the air, light as breath. It lands on the roof and melts instantly against the fresh wood. You climb down, legs trembling, and step back to admire your work. The roof gleams faintly in the fading light, a promise against the sky. You touch the edge and feel the cold dampness on your fingertips. You build up your fire again and stand near it, watching the flames reflect off the cabin walls. The smoke rises steady and proud. The structure now feels whole, sealed from the elements. You step inside for the first time and breathe in the scent of pine and clay, wood smoke and damp earth. The sound of wind muffles outside, replaced by the soft crackle of embers. You crouch near the floor and trace the lines of your new home. There is still no floor, no door, no window, but already it feels like shelter. A thought flickers in your mind how something so rough can still bring peace. Maybe comfort does not need polish, it just needs purpose. As night deepens, the snowfall thickens, blanketing your clearing in quiet. You sit beside the fire, wrapped in your coat, and watch the glow flicker through the half-open doorway. The warmth touches your face, and for the first time, you believe you might truly make it through the winter. The wind rattles the new roof once, testing it, but it holds fast. You smile at the sound, feeling a calm pride settle into your bones. You whisper to the empty room, "We did it." The forest outside exhales, and the snow keeps falling, soft and steady, wrapping your new home in silence. By the time the pale sun breaks through the clouds, the snow has stopped falling. The world outside your cabin glows under a fresh white sheet. Every branch, every stump, every footprint looks softened, almost kind. You stand inside your rough walls, gazing upward at the roof that kept the night storm from soaking you. You smile faintly. It held. The next task waits below your feet. The floor beneath you is uneven earth, frozen hard and mottled with patches of frost. Each step sends a cold ache up through your boots. If you do not fix it soon, dampness will creep up from the ground, chilling you even through the fire. You crouch, running your hand along the soil. The texture is gritty and cold, but familiar now. You will need a barrier, something solid. Some settlers laid rough planks over packed dirt, while others dug shallow trenches and filled them with stones. A few even built their cabins slightly raised on rocks or logs to keep them dry during spring floods. Letters from early Ohio settlers mention that a good floor is not luxury, it is sanity. You believe that fully as your knees press into the icy ground. You begin by leveling the soil, breaking apart clumps and spreading them evenly with the back of a shovel. The handle creaks in your hands, Each motion releases the earthy smell of cold clay mixed with pine needles. The sound of scraping metal and shifting dirt fills the cabin, steady and comforting. You pile a few stones near the center and lay short logs across them to test your idea for a simple raised platform. The first one rolls slightly, unsteady, so you wedge a flat stone beneath it. The log steadies, and you nod to yourself. Slowly, the shape of a floor begins to emerge. A curious detail appears in several regional records. Some settlers scattered ashes from their fire pits onto their cabin floors to keep insects away and absorb moisture. The ashes acted like primitive insulation, dull grey beneath their feet but surprisingly effective. You remember that as you sweep leftover ash from last night's fire into the corners of your foundation. It feels like borrowing wisdom from ghosts. Once the base is ready, you split a few long planks from your remaining logs. The wood cracks and sighs under your axe. The scent of fresh pine fills the air again, rich and clean. You drag each plank inside and fit them snugly, their rough surfaces creaking as they settle into place. When you finally stand back, the cabin floor looks uneven but strong, a patchwork of effort and persistence. You test it with your weight, pacing slowly from wall to wall. The sound is new, a solid thud instead of the crunch of frozen dirt. The vibration of each step hums through your bones like reassurance. You think of how, months from now, this same floor might echo with softer sounds. Boots drying by the fire, spoons scraping tin bowls, laughter during a thaw. Researchers who study pioneer settlements often describe the moment a floor was laid as the emotional midpoint of survival. The walls and roof meant protection, but the floor meant stability. It marked the shift from enduring to belonging. You feel that transformation settling quietly inside you now. Next, you turn your attention to the doorway. Until now, a rough gap between the logs has served as an entrance, letting both wind and light pass freely. You will need a real door soon. You trim a few leftover planks, joining them edge to edge, and binding them with crosspieces. The work is clumsy, the nails scarce, but eventually you fashion a simple rectangle that will keep the cold outside where it belongs. A detail you recall from an old carpenter's manual makes you pause. Builders once believed that the direction a door faced determined the temperament of the household. East-facing doors invited hope and renewal with each sunrise. West-facing ones promised endurance, but also melancholy. You glance toward the horizon, watch the faint light filter through the trees, and choose east. Hope feels better than melancholy. It takes most of the day to hang the door properly. The hinges are rough iron, salvaged from a wagon part. When you finally push it closed, it creaks but holds. The muffled quiet that follows feels astonishing. The wind's howl softens to a murmur. The fire's crackle becomes a heartbeat again. The sound of the outside world fades until all that remains is your own breathing. You light a small fire near the center of the room, watching the smoke twist upward through the hole in the roof. The scent of burning pine fills the air, and warmth spreads quickly. The light paints the logs in shades of amber and gold. Shadows ripple softly across the floor you built just hours ago. A diary from an early Vermont settler describes the first night with a roof, door, and floor as the evening when silence turned from threat to comfort. You understand that perfectly now. The quiet no longer feels empty. It feels earned. As night settles, snow begins to drift again, silent and light. You sit by the fire with your back against the new wall, your body exhausted but calm. The flicker of flame reflects faintly in the iron hinge, glinting like a promise. You can hear the snow gathering on the roof, a soft rustle like the sound of slow applause. Outside, the forest sleeps under its blanket of white. Inside, your world has shape, scent, and warmth. You stretch your legs across the new floor and smile to yourself, thinking that if anyone could see you now, they might not realize how close comfort and struggle sit together out here. Before you drift towards sleep, you whisper to the shadows, "We're getting there." The fire answers with a slow crack, steady and warm. The sound carries into the dark, a lullaby built from effort, breath, and the steady rhythm of survival. The morning light slides through the gaps around the door, soft and pale. Inside, the air smells faintly of wood smoke and pine sap. Your cabin has begun to feel different now. The emptiness that once echoed through it has softened into a quiet rhythm of daily life. As you stretch and stir the coals back to flame, you notice the sound of footsteps outside. You reach for your axe out of habit. Your fingers tense, but the sound is followed by laughter. Two figures appear at the edge of the clearing, their coats dusted with snow. They are neighbors, though you have never seen them before. The man lifts a hand in greeting, and the woman carries a basket covered with cloth. For a brief moment, you realize how strange it feels to see other people after so many days of solitude. You step outside and breathe in the cold air. The man introduces himself with a grin, calling you neighbor, as though the word itself builds a bridge across the forest. They have come to help with what everyone calls a raising. Accounts from early frontier communities describe these gatherings as lifelines. When a settler began building, others from miles around would travel to lend hands, tools, and laughter. One record from 1813 said that no cabin truly stood until the neighbors had touched it. You suddenly understand that phrase in a new way. The woman lifts the cloth from her basket, revealing loaves of dark bread and a jug of cider. The smell hits you like warmth itself. She smiles and says, "We eat, then we work." You grin back, surprised by how much joy those simple words bring. Soon more people arrive, bundled in rough coats and wool hats, their breath visible as they talk. They come carrying saws, ropes, and stories. There are perhaps 10 of them in all, men and women, young and old, their faces red from the cold but shining with purpose. You feel a rush of gratitude that you cannot quite put into words. One of the older men studies your cabin and nods approvingly. "Good walls," he says, running his hand along the logs. "You'll be glad for them come January." His voice carries the calm of experience, the kind that makes you trust every syllable. A folk saying passed between settlers claimed that a single cabin is a risk, but a circle of cabins is a home. You feel that truth now as they move together with easy coordination. Some begin chopping fresh logs, others mix clay for ceiling, and a few start helping you build a chimney to replace the crude hole in your roof. The sound of hammers, laughter, and conversation fills the clearing. The rhythm of community replaces the lonely thud of your solitary work. Every few minutes, someone cracks a joke or shouts encouragement, and even the trees seem to listen. The forest that once felt indifferent now feels like a witness to cooperation. An entry in a local township record from 1799 describes one such day vividly. The women brought bread and songs, the men raised the roof, and before sunset, the smoke from the new hearth marked another home claimed from wilderness. The scene unfolding around you could be that very page brought to life. By midday, the new chimney rises from your wall, built of stacked stone held by clay. Smoke from your fire now climbs through it in a clean, twisting column, disappearing into the pale sky. You smile at the sight, the same kind of pride that comes from watching your own breath on a cold morning. You sit for lunch beside your new neighbors, sharing bread, cider, and stories. Someone mentions a rumor that a trader will pass through before winter ends, bringing sugar and coffee. The talk turns to family, to lost friends, to the hardships that never quite stop but somehow become bearable when shared. A curious note from an old minister's memoir tells that during these house raisings, some settlers carried a small bottle of whiskey to bless the rafters. The custom was meant to keep away misfortune and to celebrate the completion of a home. When one of the men offers you a sip, you laugh and take it. The burn in your throat feels like fire meeting fire. By afternoon, the work continues with easy rhythm. The younger boys carry stones for the hearth, the women reinforce gaps with moss, and the older men test each beam for strength. When the final piece is set into place, a cheer rises through the clearing. The sound echoes across the trees, startling a flock of birds into flight. Modern historians often highlight how these gatherings formed the first sense of community identity in the frontier. They were more than labor exchanges. They were social bonds woven through necessity. Out here, survival required cooperation, and every shared task carried the weight of belonging. As the day fades, the helpers prepare to leave, their laughter still lingering in the air. The woman who brought bread squeezes your arm before departing. "You'll manage fine," she says. "Just keep the fire fed." The door latched against the wind. Her words feel like both advice and blessing. When the last of them disappear down the snowy path, you stand at the edge of your clearing, watching their footprints fade into twilight. The forest feels quieter but no longer lonely. The traces of their presence remain in every improvement they helped you make. You step back inside your cabin, closing the door gently behind you. The warmth from the fire spreads evenly now, no smoke choking the air. The chimney works. You sit on your wooden floor and listen to the faint crackle of burning pine. The smell of bread lingers, mingled with smoke and clay. You think of what the older man said, that no cabin truly stands until others have touched it. You understand now that survival in this place was never meant to be a solitary triumph. It was always a chorus. Outside, the wind rises again, but its voice seems softer tonight. You stretch out beside the fire, feeling safe, and let your eyes close to the rhythm of popping embers and the faint whisper of the world beyond your door. The next morning smells faintly of smoke and baked bread. The fire has burned low, but the cabin holds its warmth. You sit up slowly, rubbing your eyes, and listen to the soft creak of the walls as they settle in the cold. The quiet feels alive. A faint glow filters through the cracks around the door. You have neighbors now, and though they are far, their presence hums somewhere in your thoughts. Today, you begin to notice the smaller things that make a cabin feel human. The coarse bark on the walls scratches against your fingers as you move around. Your breath still mists in the air, but the space no longer feels like a box of wood and earth. It is becoming something gentler. The smell of pine and clay is beginning to fade, replaced by something warm, faintly sweet, the scent of life returning. You start tidying the inside, gathering chips of wood and sweeping them toward the hearth with a bundle of twigs tied together with string. The motion feels soothing, rhythmic. The cabin hums softly with the sound of your sweeping, like a heartbeat steadying itself after a long run. In every story of the frontier, there is one quiet truth often overlooked. The women of these settlements shaped survival into comfort. Historical journals speak of them transforming bare walls into living homes. They brought not just endurance but beauty into hardship, making the wilderness bearable. You can almost imagine one now, humming softly while spreading quilts along the logs, hanging dried herbs from the rafters, filling the air with the faint perfume of lavender and smoke. The same journals describe how women ground corn by hand, churned butter in wooden buckets, and mended torn shirts by the light of the fire. These small acts were not decoration. They were resistance against despair. A domestic guide published in the 1830 seconds mentioned that a woman's needle holds the house together better than any nail. The phrase feels poetic but also profoundly true. You picture such hands, rough from work yet graceful in motion, sewing patches that tell stories of scarcity and pride. Outside, the snow crunches under your boots as you step out for firewood. The world sparkles under the morning light, every branch lined with frost. You catch sight of the same deer from before, watching again from the edge of the clearing. Its ears twitch at your movement, but it does not flee. You wonder if it recognizes you now, or perhaps just the scent of safety radiating from the smoke above your cabin. Back inside, you arrange your supplies. The rhythm of routine begins to take hold. Stack the logs, sweep the ashes, warm the room, mend what is torn. There is peace in the ordinary, a comfort that feels hard-earned. Scholars of frontier life often note that women's work, though rarely recorded, kept the settlements alive as surely as the men's axes did. They preserved food, taught children, and passed along folk remedies that saved entire families from illness. Without their invisible labor, the frontier might have broken under its own loneliness. A letter written by a homesteader's wife near the Great Lakes captures it simply: "My husband built the cabin. I built the home." You think about that as you glance around your own space. Even without the quilts and herbs, the lesson feels clear. It is not enough to build shelter. You must also give it warmth. You decide to make small changes. You hang your coat near the door, drape your blanket along the wall to stop the draft, and set a few smooth stones near the hearth to hold heat after the fire dies. The cabin feels less harsh already. You hum quietly as you work, echoing that imagined voice from earlier, the one who hummed while making something out of nothing. As the afternoon fades, the fire's light deepens to amber. The room glows softly, and the world outside turns blue. You sit near the hearth, resting your hands on your knees, and let the heat seep into your skin. The crackle of firewood becomes almost hypnotic. You think about how every settlement must have had one woman whose presence changed everything. Maybe she taught others how to cook with less, how to weave mats from reeds, how to turn dried berries into medicine. These small acts of sharing became the hidden architecture of survival. Folklore from the old territories mentions the hearth women, a term of respect for those who could keep a cabin warm with both fire and spirit. They were said to carry light in their hands, to calm storms with a song or silence, an argument with bread. You smile at the thought, wondering how many such women the frontier truly saw. The snow begins again outside, soft flakes gliding past the cracks of the shutter. You place another log on the fire and listen to it pop and hiss. The scent of resin fills the air, sweet and smoky. The warmth settles around you like a blanket. A small realization blooms quietly in your chest. Comfort does not come from abundance. It comes from care, the kind you give to things that will not survive otherwise. The women of the frontier knew that long before it became written wisdom. You stretch your legs toward the fire, feeling the steady pulse of heat against your soles. Outside, the forest has gone still. Inside, your home glows with a warmth that feels older than words. The wind sighs gently along the walls, not as an intruder this time, but as a reminder that the world beyond is vast, wild, and waiting. You whisper softly, "We're learning how to live." The fire answers with a long crack, sparks rising like stars caught in your breath. The light sways, then steadies, as if agreeing with you. You close your eyes, listening to the soft sound of snow touching your roof, and drift into dreams that smell of pine, bread, and quiet resilience. By the time you wake, the fire has gone to ash, but a faint warmth lingers in the room. The walls hum softly with the memory of heat. You rise slowly, pulling your blanket tight around your shoulders, and listen to the stillness. The forest beyond your door is locked in white silence, yet your cabin feels alive, breathing with you. It is time to tend the heart of your home, the hearth itself. You kneel before the circle of stones that make up your fireplace. They are rough, uneven, and blackened by smoke. You scrape out the ashes from last night, their texture soft and powdery between your fingers. The faint scent of burnt pine clings to them. You pile fresh kindling in a small pyramid, laying dry twigs beneath and thicker branches on top. With flint and steel, you strike a spark, and it flares to life, fragile but insistent. The flame catches, crackles, and begins to grow. You watch it dance up through the smoke, golden and alive. The light spills across the room, chasing the shadows into corners. Every cabin on the frontier relied on this same glow. It was warmth, food, and companionship combined. A record from an early Vermont homestead describes the hearth as the one true guardian against despair. Without it, settlers froze or starved. With it, they found the strength to endure. You feel the truth of that as your hands warm above the growing blaze. The fire becomes your teacher. You learn how it breathes, how it prefers slow feeding, how it rewards patience. Too much wood, and it smothers itself. Too little, and it sulks into smoke. You adjust the logs carefully, coaxing them until the light burns steady and calm. The smell of burning sap fills the cabin. The walls gleam with soft gold, and for a moment, the air feels almost sweet. You stretch your fingers toward the heat and close your eyes, letting it seep into your skin. There is something spiritual about this ritual. Diaries from frontier women often describe the morning fire as a kind of prayer. They rose before dawn, stirred the coals, and whispered quiet thanks for another day of warmth. Some even believed that if the flame died completely, misfortune would soon follow. You smile at the thought and promise yourself to keep it alive. You set a small iron pot on the fire, heating the last of your cornmeal. The smell is faint but comforting. The sound of the bubbling mixture mixes with the crackle of the wood, creating a steady rhythm that feels like music meant only for you. As the morning stretches on, you find yourself speaking softly to the fire. You tell it your plans: to cut more wood, to trap rabbits, to seal the roof again before the next storm. It does not answer, but it listens. You can feel it listening. Folklore from the early frontier tells of families who treated their hearths almost like living companions. Some named their fires, speaking to them as though they could hear. A few even tossed small crumbs of bread into the flames as offerings. The superstition may sound strange now, yet as you sit in the warmth, it feels less like superstition and more like gratitude. You step outside to gather more logs, the cold rushing in like an old rival. The snow crunches beneath your boots, the air crisp and biting. You split wood steadily, the axe rising and falling with rhythm and purpose. Each strike sends a small echo through the trees, breaking the silence. When your arms begin to ache, you return inside, arms full of fresh fuel. The moment you open the door, the warmth wraps around you like a familiar embrace. The smell of smoke, pine, and cooked grain mingles in the air. You add another log to the fire, and it responds instantly, crackling brighter as if welcoming you back. Experts studying early American domestic life often call the hearth the center of community. It was where families gathered to eat, to mend, to talk. In many homes, it was the only source of light through the long, dark months. To sit by it was to belong, even if the world outside remained unkind. You can imagine how evenings might look in a frontier family's cabin, children huddled near the glow, listening to stories about spirits and storms, a mother sewing by the flicker, her shadow moving softly on the wall, a father mending a broken tool, pausing to feed the fire when it sighed. You catch yourself smiling. Even alone, the hearth feels like company. The sound, the warmth, the subtle light, it fills the silence better than any voice could. You can almost hear echoes of those old stories if you let your mind drift enough. A traveler's journal from 1804 records a line that fits your thoughts perfectly. The fire spoke when we were too tired to. That small sentence lingers in your head as you stare into the flames, the wood shifting and glowing like living embers of memory. Evening comes slowly. Outside, the world turns blue, and the first stars shimmer faintly through the haze of snow. Inside, your fire burns low and steady, its light soft and golden. You sit cross-legged before it, your face warm, your back cool. The rhythm of the crackling wood becomes your pulse. You reach out and stir the coals once more, the orange glow deepening to red. The fire hisses quietly, content. You realize that you no longer fear the night. The flame has taught you how to be still, how to rest without waiting for disaster. Before you lie down, you whisper to the glowing embers, "Thank you for staying." The warmth answers in silence, steady and sure. Outside, snow begins again, whispering softly against the roof, but you barely hear it. The fire hums like a lullaby, and sleep comes easily. When you open your eyes, the light that filters through the chinks is pale and almost blue. The fire has burned low again, leaving a thin column of smoke rising through the chimney. You sit up, rubbing warmth back into your fingers, and listen. The sound outside is different today. It is softer, heavier. The world has gone quiet under the weight of deep snow. You step to the door and lift the latch. The cold rushes in instantly, biting your cheeks and nose. Before you, the clearing has transformed into a sea of white. Snowdrifts curl against your cabin walls, half burying the firewood pile. The sky is colorless, heavy with more to come. Your first true winter has arrived. You pull your coat tight and step outside, boots sinking deep into the powder. The air feels thick, muffled. Even your own footsteps seem hesitant in this silence. You move slowly, checking the roofline, brushing snow away from the chimney, testing the logs for moisture. Every action takes twice as long in cold, but each one feels necessary. Contemporary letters from settlers in the Northern Territories describe scenes like this with awe and dread. One woman wrote, "The snow fell without end, and the sound of the axe no longer echoed." Reading those words later, people would marvel at her calmness. But standing here, you understand the fatigue behind them. You return to the cabin and feed the fire. The warmth spreads slowly, unevenly. The logs pop and hiss, sending little sparks upward. You watch the flames dance, grateful for their stubborn light. The window gaps glow faintly, and outside the storm builds its own rhythm. You spend the day tending what you can. You stack more wood inside, mend a small tear in your coat, and check your food stores. The salted meat is hard as stone, the cornmeal low, but it will last if rationed carefully. You melt snow in a pot, watching the steam curl upward in ghostly shapes. An entry from a pioneer's journal describes this part of winter as the season of patience. Travel stops, work slows, and even the heart feels quieter. You feel that truth in every slow breath. The walls creak softly, the snow presses down from above, and the wind hums through the trees like a distant hymn. You find yourself pacing the small cabin, restless. The fire's warmth is both a comfort and a trap. There is nowhere else to go. Time stretches oddly inside these walls. It is not measured by hours anymore, but by the cycle of feeding the fire and watching the flames fade. To keep your mind steady, you hum. A melody from home, maybe, or something you've invented without realizing it. The sound fills the cabin gently, blending with the crackle of burning wood. The rhythm calms you. The heat on your face, the scent of smoke, the flicker of orange light, these things anchor you to the moment. A curious anecdote in an old diary recalls how settlers used to tell stories to keep their minds sharp during long storms. Some claimed that forgetting how to talk after too many silent weeks was a real danger. You chuckle quietly at that thought, then speak aloud to yourself, just to hear your own voice again. You're still here, you say, and so is the roof. Outside, the wind picks up, whistling softly along the chimney. The cabin trembles slightly. You glance up at the beams and feel a pulse of worry, but they hold steady. The roof creaks like a sleeping creature turning over. Researchers studying early American settlements note that the first winter often tested the limits of both endurance and sanity. Loneliness, cold, and hunger formed a trinity that no wall could fully block. Yet many survived through rhythm, small acts of control, and the strange comfort of routine. You can feel that lesson taking shape inside you now. By late afternoon, the world has vanished into white. The trees beyond your clearing are invisible, swallowed by snow and mist. You light another candle, the flame trembling in the draught. Its light mingles with the fire's glow, painting the logs in soft gold. You sit close to the hearth, stirring the pot where melted snow warms into water. The sound is faint but soothing, a promise of something to drink, something real. You think about all the people who must have sat like this centuries ago, watching the same slow dance of firelight on wood, hearing the same breath of winter through the walls. A traveler once wrote that, "Winter is the frontier's greatest teacher." You repeat the words quietly, feeling their truth. The season strips away vanity, hurry, and pride, leaving only what can endure. You are learning how to listen, how to wait, how to keep moving in small, patient circles of purpose. Night falls early. The storm's voice deepens, moaning through the trees like an old instrument. You sit by the fire with your knees pulled to your chest, your blanket draped around your shoulders. The heat flickers unevenly, and the shadows sway. You are both alone and surrounded by the wood, the snow, and the steady rhythm of survival. Before you lie down, you whisper to the room, "Just one more night." The wind roars in reply, shaking the door, but you hear no threat in it anymore. It is simply the sound of the world reminding you that you are still part of it. You close your eyes, the glow of the fire still bright against your lids. The warmth seeps into your bones as the cabin creaks around you, holding firm beneath the storm. You drift into sleep, listening to the heartbeat of the wind and the soft sigh of settling snow. When the storm finally breaks, the world feels reborn. The air is sharp and clear, and sunlight spills through the trees like honey. The snow outside glitters so brightly that it hurts your eyes. You push open the door carefully, half expecting the cold to fight back, but the day is calm, the silence deep and generous. For the first time in days, you can hear the forest breathe again. Your footprints from earlier in the week have vanished. The clearing looks untouched, as if no human hand has ever shaped it. You laugh quietly to yourself and step into the powder, your boots sinking deep. Each movement leaves a new trail across the blank white canvas, proof that you are still here, still marking the world in small ways. You hear a faint noise in the distance, something light and high-pitched. You pause and listen. Then it comes again, laughter, children's laughter. It drifts through the trees, mingled with the crisp sound of snow crunching and the snap of small branches. You follow the sound, curious and smiling. At the edge of the clearing you see them, two children sliding down a small hill on makeshift sleds carved from bark. Their cheeks are flushed red, their hands bare and quick. They fall, tumble, and rise again, shrieking with joy that cuts through the frozen air. Behind them, a woman stands wrapped in a shawl, her face half hidden by a smile. You wave, and she waves back. These must be the children of one of your new neighbors, perhaps from the cabin near the river. They wave their sticks like banners and call out for you to join them. You shake your head, laughing, but your heart feels unexpectedly warm. Historical records from early settlements often mention how children found joy in the harshest conditions. They played with pine cones, carved dolls from corn husks, and built tiny snow houses beside their parents' cabins. Their laughter filled the silence of endless winters, softening the weight of isolation. You can almost hear those echoes across time as you watch the scene before you. You gather a handful of snow and shape it into a ball, tossing it gently in their direction. The children squeal and retaliate immediately, their throws clumsy but spirited. For a few minutes, the clearing becomes a battlefield of laughter and snow. The sound of it lifts your chest, easing something inside you that has been too tight for too long. When the game ends, you help them build a small snow fort, stacking blocks with care while they chatter about nothing and everything. Their mother thanks you with a nod and invites you to visit sometime when the weather warms. You promise you will, and as they head back toward their home, the clearing feels brighter for their passing. You stand there for a long moment, letting the sunlight warm your face. You realize that this small burst of human joy has changed the feel of your land. It no longer feels like a battlefield between you and the wild. It feels shared, even blessed. A small note in an 1824 diary written by a frontier teacher said, "The laughter of children was the true measure of settlement." Reading that now, you can understand it completely. The wilderness was never truly conquered by axe or plow, but by the sound of play. You head back to your cabin and tend the fire, humming a simple tune the children were singing earlier. The rhythm stays in your mind as you work, cheerful and light. For the first time since autumn, you feel not only safe but content. You brew a thin soup of melted snow and dried vegetables. The scent fills the room, faint but pleasant. As you eat, you remember your own childhood. Different land, different time, but the same joy in simple things. Maybe the frontier has always been less about taming nature and more about remembering what matters when everything else is stripped away. As the day fades, The forest glows in soft amber light. You stand outside again, watching the shadows lengthen across the snow. Somewhere far off, you can hear the faint echo of a child's laughter once more. The sound carries through the trees, thin but steady. It feels like a promise that life will always find its way through the cold. Researchers who study early frontier families often note how children shaped resilience in the adults around them. Their games became a kind of emotional survival, proof that joy could coexist with hardship. Even now, as you stand in the fading light, you can feel the truth of that in your bones. The cold deepens as the sun sinks behind the trees. You return to your fire, the orange glow flickering across the walls. You imagine the children safe in their own cabin, huddled near a similar hearth, whispering about their day. The thought makes you smile. Before you sleep, you write a few lines on a scrap of bark with a piece of charcoal. Today the snow was kind, and laughter returned. You set it on the mantel beside the fire, unsure if you will keep it or burn it tomorrow. For now, it feels like the right thing to do to leave a small record of peace in a season made for struggle. Outside, the night sky sharpens with stars, and the snow glows faintly in their light. You lie down near the fire, the warmth curling against your side, and think of the sound of children playing. It lingers even after your eyes close, blending with the whisper of the wind, a gentle reminder that joy, once found, does not easily fade. Morning comes slowly, with pale sunlight slipping through the small cracks around the door. The world outside has settled into quiet after the laughter of yesterday. You stir the fire back to life, watching the first sparks catch and grow, and you feel the rhythm of another day begin. The cold presses at the walls, but inside, there is warmth, light, and the faint smell of smoke that clings to everything you own. You sit for a moment beside the hearth, stretching your legs toward the glow, and let your thoughts wander. The silence feels heavier now. The children's voices are gone, the air too still. It is in these long pauses of winter that loneliness begins to creep in like a slow draft through an unsealed wall. You decide to take stock of your supplies. The shelves are sparse but orderly. A small sack of cornmeal, a few strips of salted pork, dried beans in a cloth bag, and the hard loaf you've been rationing. You count everything twice, the way settlers always did. Hunger does not announce itself loudly out here. It grows quietly, one day at a time. In the corner, your old pack rests against the wall, covered with dust and the scent of the forest. You dig through it until you find a bundle wrapped in leather, a few trade tokens, some flint, and a tiny scrap of folded paper from home. The writing is faded, the edges worn soft. It is a letter you've read 100 times. The words are simple, about good wishes and a promise to write again. No more letters came. You touch the paper to your forehead and tuck it away before the ache becomes too sharp. Historical letters from the frontier often mention this kind of waiting, the endless stretch between deliveries, the doubt about whether anyone still remembers your name. One settler wrote, "The silence of no letter is louder than thunder." You feel that echo now, the quiet pressing against your ribs. You decide to get outside before the feeling settles too deep. The air is clear and cold, your breath hanging before you like smoke. You pull your coat tighter and follow the narrow trail toward the river. The snow crunches beneath your boots, and each step breaks the stillness just enough. At the water's edge, a thin layer of ice glistens under the sunlight. The surface is delicate, almost glass-like. You crouch, breaking a small section with the end of a stick. The sound is sharp, clean, and oddly satisfying. Beneath the ice, the current moves slowly, dark and smooth. You dip your hands in the freezing water, feeling life pulse there, silent but strong. Accounts from trappers and traders tell of winters when rivers froze solid and entire settlements were cut off from the world. Some people survived on what they had stored, while others risked thin ice to find food. You are not that desperate yet, but you understand how easily survival could turn fragile. You collect fallen branches and driftwood along the shore. The effort warms your body, chasing away the numbness that lingers in your fingers. You pause now and then to listen, no voices, no animals, just the soft creak of trees shifting in the cold. When you return to your cabin, you notice something new. Hanging from the door handle is a small bundle wrapped in cloth. You look around, but see no footprints except your own. Inside the bundle are 2 pieces of dried meat, a handful of apples, and a scrap of fabric tied into a bow. Someone must have left it quietly while you were gone. You smile, touched by the quiet generosity. On the edge of the cloth is a note written in rough script. For trade or friendship, whichever you prefer. It must be from your neighbors. You sit at your table and unwrap an apple, its surface wrinkled but sweet. The first bite tastes of kindness, sharp and crisp. Such exchanges were the backbone of early communities. Historians often call it the barter of trust. Gifts traded not just for goods, but for goodwill. You decide that tomorrow you will return the gesture with something of your own. A piece of firewood, maybe a small carving. The thought warms you more than the fire. As afternoon fades, you set aside the wood you gathered and check the sky. The horizon glows faintly pink, the first real color in days. The air smells clean and full of promise. You sit by the door, the apple core in your hand, and feel the weight of silence ease a little. A curious story told among first pioneers said that when a stranger left food at your door, it was not just charity but a blessing meant to keep your house from falling cold. Some claimed it invited good fortune for both giver and receiver. Whether or not you believe it, you can feel the truth of it in your chest. Night comes quietly. You add another log to the fire and watch the flames climb higher. The warmth reflects on the wooden walls, giving them a soft glow. You take one of the apples, slice it thin, and hang the pieces on a string near the hearth to dry. The sweet scent fills the room, light and familiar. Before lying down, you take a last look at the note that came with the food. The handwriting is rough but careful, each letter drawn with thought. You tuck it into a small crack between the logs near your bed, as if planting it there might let its warmth grow roots. You stretch out on your blanket, the fire humming gently beside you. The shadows waver on the ceiling like slow-moving water. Your stomach is full, your body tired, and for the first time in days, you feel connected again not to a place, but to the people sharing this silent world with you. Outside, the wind begins to rise, low and steady, brushing against the door as if whispering approval. You close your eyes, and before sleep takes you, you murmur softly, "Thank you, whoever you are." The fire cracks in response, and the cabin breathes quietly through the long winter night. The storm passes, and the cold deepens into the kind of quiet that makes sound itself feel heavy. Your cabin walls are lined with frost along the bottom seams, thin silver veins glowing faintly in the dim morning light. You stir the fire until it snaps awake, grateful for its answering warmth. It is another long day of waiting out the deep freeze, and the mind begins to search for comfort in small things. You glance toward the pile of wood beside the hearth, the apples drying neatly on their string, the few remaining rations stacked carefully in their places. You have done well, but the days are blending together, each one as pale and silent as the last. The quiet presses close, so you decide to busy your hands before your thoughts turn restless. You take a scrap of cloth from your pack and begin stitching a small patch into your sleeve. The thread catches, the needle gleams in the light. The movement is slow, careful, and soothing. You remember how your mother once showed you the same gesture, her voice soft as she said that steady work was the cure for worry. She must have been right. From early 19th century accounts, it is clear that settlers relied on crafts like this to survive the stillness of winter. When the snow was too deep for hunting and the cold too bitter for travel, they turned to sewing, carving, and mending. Some made quilts from every scrap of cloth they owned. Others shaped toys from bits of wood to keep their children hopeful through the cold. You pause for a moment, stretching your back. The sound of the fire fills the silence. The cabin glows in the firelight, softening the rough edges of the logs. It smells of pine, resin, smoke, and faint sweetness from the drying fruit. For a moment, you imagine you are sitting in the heart of something alive, You take a few more stitches, smiling at how uneven they are. Perfection is a luxury out here. What matters is that the work holds. It is a small act of defiance, a statement that you will not let decay win. In the corner, you notice a small pattern of frost on the window gap, curling into delicate swirls like lace. You trace it with your finger, leaving a faint line where the ice melts at your touch. The beauty of it surprises you. Out here, even cold can create something lovely. A passage from an 1809 letter written by a settler's wife comes to mind. We find beauty where we can, for the Lord has hidden it even in hardship. You whisper those words to yourself and feel their weight settle like a prayer. Later, you decide to make candles. You gather the small pieces of leftover fat saved from meals and melt them carefully in a tin cup above the fire. The smell is sharp at first, then fades into something clean. You twist strips of cloth for wicks and pour the hot liquid into small molds you fashioned from bark. The wax hardens slowly, turning pale and smooth. Soon you have 3 new candles, uneven but proud little guardians against the night. Records from the frontier mention how candles were treasures in the cold season. A single flame meant hope, company, and sometimes even love letters written in the dim light of their glow. You think about that as you set one of your candles in the corner, lighting it with a stick from the fire. The gentle light fills the cabin with a quiet peace. You sit back, the warmth of the fire on your face and the soft glow of the candle beside you. You realize how human survival often depends not only on strength but on the ability to make light when darkness presses close. As you work, you begin humming again, the same small tune that carried you through the storm. It weaves through the room softly, mixing with the sound of the fire. You think of your neighbors, the children, the mysterious gift of apples at your door. The memory makes you smile. The world beyond your walls feels far away yet not unreachable. Scholars studying early frontier life sometimes note that the art of endurance was rarely dramatic. It was quiet and handmade, stitched in cloth, molded in wax, whispered in song. You glance at your patchwork sleeve, at your uneven candles, and feel that truth settle in your chest. Every small act becomes a declaration that life will continue, no matter how cold the wind outside. By late afternoon, the sun has slipped behind the trees. The light that remains filters through the window, cracks in thin golden lines. You sit by the fire, turning your candles in your hands, admiring how they catch the last of the glow. A detail from an old diary mentions that families often saved their last candle of winter for a celebration when the first bird's song was heard again. They called it the candle of Thor, a sign that the world was waking. You look at your 3 small candles and decide you will save one for that day. Night arrives quietly, the cold pressing against the cabin's sides. You light a second candle and place it near your bed, its flame trembling but steady. The air glows softly, painting the walls in shades of amber and gold. You lie back, listening to the faint murmur of the fire and the candle's soft hiss. Before sleep comes, you whisper to the flame, "Keep me warm, little light." The wick flutters as if answering. The shadows stretch long across the ceiling, swaying gently like branches in a calm wind. You close your eyes and let the stillness cradle you. Somewhere beyond the walls, the forest sighs, patient and waiting. The next morning greets you with a silence so deep that it hums in your ears. You lie still for a moment, listening. The fire has burned itself to pale ash, and the air inside the cabin feels brittle with cold. Your breath fogs faintly, rising in soft clouds that vanish near the roof. You know you must move quickly before the frost sinks into your bones. You throw open the door and step outside, boots crunching on snow that sparkles like crushed glass. The air is knife-sharp, cutting but clean. Then, from somewhere in the trees, you hear it a low growl, faint but unmistakable. You stop, scanning the forest edge. A shadow moves between the trunks, then disappears. You remember what you've heard from others in the settlement. Winter brings hunger to everything that breathes. Wolves prowl closer to smoke, bears dig shallow dens when the ground is too hard, and smaller animals creep toward cabins, drawn by the scent of salt and meat. You go back inside and close the door firmly. The sound fades, replaced by the soft creak of the walls. Still, your heart beats faster. You check your supplies, making sure nothing has been left outside to tempt scavengers. Everything looks in order, but you keep your axe near the fire anyway. Frontier accounts from the late 1700s often describe how wildlife tested the boundaries of human settlement each winter. In one story, a family in the Maine woods woke to find a bear paw pushing through their chimney. In another, wolves circled a cabin for 3 nights until the settlers lit a ring of torches around the walls. Reading such tales back in the comfort of civilization must have made them sound heroic. Living them, you realize, is something else entirely. You take a moment to breathe, forcing calm back into your chest. The danger outside feels distant now, yet it lingers in the air like a scent. You add wood to the fire and warm your hands, watching the flames flicker against the logs. Each spark feels like a heartbeat, steady and alive. A scraping sound breaks the quiet. You freeze, then realize it comes from the roof. A light scuffle, then stillness. You step carefully to the door, open it just enough to peer upward. A raven perches on the chimney, black feathers gleaming against the snow. It cocks its head at you, curious, then lets out a sharp cry before taking off into the white sky. You exhale, half laughing, half shaking. Folklore from the frontier treated ravens as messengers, sometimes of good news, sometimes of warning. You decide to take it as the first. It feels better that way. Later in the day, when the sun reaches its low arc, you put on your coat and walk a little farther into the forest to gather wood. The snow comes up to your knees, and each movement sends a puff of powder flying. You spot tracks in the snow, tiny prints of rabbits, the delicate marks of a fox, and once a heavier trail that makes you pause. The shape could be a wolf's, though it's old, half filled by new snow. You keep your axe close and move quietly. A hunter's journal from the early frontier described the relationship between settlers and wild animals as a conversation written in footprints. You think of that now, how both sides leave messages in the snow, never meeting directly, yet always aware of each other's presence. You gather what branches you can carry and return to your clearing. The cabin looks almost swallowed by snow, the roof blending with the drifts. Only the faint curl of smoke from the chimney marks it as human. It strikes you suddenly how fragile it all is, how small one cabin seems in the vastness of forest and sky. Yet it stands, and that is enough. Inside, the fire welcomes you with a hiss as you feed it fresh wood. The warmth rises quickly, fogging the edges of the window. You peel off your gloves and sit near the hearth, listening to the pop of sap in the logs. The sound feels alive, a companion in the solitude. Historians who study early survival often remark that fear was as much a part of the landscape as snow or trees. People did not banish it, they learned to live beside it. You think about that, how each sound outside still makes your body tense, but not with panic, now only awareness. The forest is not cruel, it is indifferent. Respect it, and it might respect you back. Evening settles in softly. You check your traps near the edge of the clearing and find one rabbit, its fur pale against the iron. You whisper an apology, quick and quiet, before carrying it inside. The meat will last several meals if you ration it carefully. The small life becomes part of your survival, part of your story. As the night deepens, you sit before the fire with the door latched tight. The wind outside grows restless, shaking the branches. Somewhere far off, you hear a faint howl, long and mournful. It sends a chill up your spine, yet it sounds less like threat and more like a reminder. You are not the only creature enduring this winter. You watch the flames climb and fall, the light dancing across the rough logs of the walls. The cabin feels solid, protective, yet alive in its own way, creaking and sighing with the wind. You think again of the raven, of the hidden tracks in the snow, of the balance between wildness and human will. Before sleep, you whisper a quiet promise into the fire. I'll keep the light. You keep the dark. The logs shift in answer, glowing brighter for a moment. You lie back on your blanket, the sound of the wind outside fading into a low hum. The night stretches long, but inside the walls, warmth and fire hold steady, and you drift into dreams where snow falls without sound, and the forest watches, patient and eternal. When you wake, the light filtering through the door crack is faint and grey. The air inside the cabin feels heavier than usual, thick with the scent of smoke and damp wood. You sit up, your breath misting in the cold air, and listen. The forest outside has gone still again, too still. Winter has taken full hold of the land, and the silence carries its own kind of weight. You check the food stores and find what you already feared. The last strip of salted meat, a little cornmeal, a few dried apples. Enough for a few days, no more. Hunger is not a stranger, but now it sits closer, quiet and waiting. You know you will need to fish the river or trap more game before the next storm arrives. You pull on your coat and step into the freezing air. The cold cuts sharply through the wool, but you keep walking. Following the faint line of the river you can barely see beneath its frozen skin. Your boots crunch against the thin crust of snow, and each breath burns a little. The world around you glows faintly in the pale light, as if carved from glass. At the water's edge, you kneel and test the ice. It groans faintly under your weight, but holds. You chip a small hole with the back of your hatchet, careful and steady. The first few blows echo across the trees like distant drums. When the surface finally cracks, a dark circle of water appears, steaming faintly in the cold air. You lower a line made of string and bone, baited with a scrap of fat. Then you wait. The stillness is both peaceful and cruel. Minutes stretch into hours. You hear only the wind brushing the treetops and the faint creak of ice shifting beneath the river's skin. You think about all the other settlers who must have knelt by rivers like this, hoping the same hope that something living still moves beneath the frozen world. An old journal from 1806 describes ice fishing in winter as the prayer of patience. The writer claimed that even if no fish came, the act of waiting reminded him that life continued below, unseen but steady. You understand that now. The line trembles once, then goes still again. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the string jerks in your hand. You pull hard, careful not to let it snap. A silver shape breaks the surface, thrashing weakly in the air. You laugh out loud, the sound echoing off the frozen banks. The fish gleams in the pale light, small but alive, its scales glinting like coins. You thank it quietly before ending its struggle. You make your way back to the cabin, your hands numb and your feet aching. The fish feels heavy in your pocket. Though it weighs almost nothing, it is proof that the river still gives. When you push open the door, the warmth inside hits you like an embrace. You stoke the fire and hang your catch above it, the smell of cooking filling the room. Frontier records often note that survival in deep winter depended less on skill than on restraint. People learned to stretch everything to use every bone, every drop of fat, every handful of flour. You watch the fish sizzle, and when you eat, you savor each bite as though it were a feast. The taste is faintly smoky, the texture soft and delicate. You chew slowly, feeling strength return to your limbs. After the meal, you sit quietly, staring into the fire. The warmth spreads through you, slow and steady. Outside, the wind rises again, brushing the roof with a faint sigh. The forest seems to exhale with you. A curious tradition from some river settlements comes to mind. The first fish caught in winter was sometimes shared symbolically, a gesture of gratitude to the water. People believed that giving back ensured future catches. You have no one nearby to share with, but you tear off a small piece and toss it into the flames. The fire flares bright, as if answering the offering. You take the rest of the bones and boil them in a pot for broth. The smell is gentle, almost sweet. It fills the cabin and clings to the wooden walls, turning hunger into memory. The steam fogs the air, softening the edges of everything. As the day fades, you step outside again. The sky glows faintly pink near the horizon, the kind of light that comes just before dusk. You hear the faint groan of ice shifting on the river, the whisper of wind through bare branches. The forest feels ancient, vast, and strangely kind for once. Scholars who study early frontier life often mention how people began to see the landscape as both adversary and ally. You can feel that duality clearly now. The cold hurts, yet it also sharpens your senses. The isolation tests you, but it also teaches focus. The same world that threatens to kill you is the one that feeds you. You walk back to the cabin, watching smoke curl upward from your chimney against the fading light. The sight fills you with a quiet pride. Inside, the fire glows warmly, the air rich with the scent of cooked fish and pine smoke. You hang your damp coat near the flames and sit down, letting the fatigue settle gently into your bones. Outside, the river continues its slow song beneath the ice. You listen through the walls, imagining it winding endlessly through forest and snow, carrying stories from places you may never see. You whisper a soft thank you into the stillness and close your eyes. The night comes quietly, wrapping the world in cold and shadow. But inside, the warmth holds, the fire hums softly, and for the first time in days, you sleep without hunger gnawing at your dreams. The morning begins with the faint sound of dripping. You open your eyes slowly, unsure if it is real. Then you hear it again, soft and steady. The roof is shedding last night's frost. A rare hint of warmth has crept into the air, and a thin mist rises from the ground outside. You sit up and breathe in the scent of melting snow and smoke. The world feels alive again, if only for a moment. You eat the last of the broth from yesterday and step outside into a pale light that makes the trees shimmer. Your breath is still visible, but the cold no longer stings. The forest feels gentler, softer. You take a few steps toward the tree line and stop when you notice something unusual. There are footprints, not your own. They are smaller, lighter, moving from the edge of the woods toward your cabin. They pause near your woodpile, then turn back toward the trees. You kneel, tracing one with your glove. The toes point outward, the heel narrow, not animal, human. Your heart beats faster, though not from fear. You glance toward the horizon where the river winds between the trees, and you think of your neighbors, the family with the children, the quiet woman who left food at your door. Maybe they passed by early this morning. Maybe they came for help, or simply to see if you were still alive. You follow the trail for a short distance. The prints lead to a small clearing where the trees open wide around a half-buried fire pit. Beside it sits a woven basket filled with dried herbs and bark. You lift it carefully, inhaling the sharp scent of pine and sage. These are medicines, the kind you have seen before but never used. Someone has left them for you. Encounters like this filled the journals of early settlers. Travelers wrote about how native neighbors shared knowledge of the land, what to eat, how to cure fevers, when to read the sky for storms. Without that help, many would not have lived through their first winters. You think of those stories now as you cradle the basket in your hands. You walk back to the cabin and set the bundle beside the hearth. The herb scent fills the room as they warm by the fire. You recognize dried willow bark, good for pain, and crushed juniper, used to clean wounds. There are other leaves you cannot name, their edges curled and dark from the cold. You decide to brew a little into tea, curious about their strength. You heat a pot of water and sprinkle in a few leaves. The liquid turns pale gold and gives off a smell that reminds you of the forest floor after rain. You sip carefully. The taste is bitter but clean, grounding. Warmth spreads through your body slowly, as if the forest itself has reached inside to thaw you. A note falls from the bottom of the basket. The handwriting is uneven, drawn with charcoal on rough bark. The people before us drank this for strength. It helped when the cold was unkind. You trace the letters with your finger, touched by the simple generosity. Historians still debate how much of early pioneer survival came from indigenous knowledge. Some argue it was everything. Others claim settlers adapted on their own. The truth probably lies between the two, but as you drink the forest's medicine, the argument feels distant and unimportant. What matters is that kindness once again crossed the snow. You step outside later in the afternoon to look for more signs of whoever left the basket. The forest is quiet, yet you feel eyes watching, not in menace but in care. A breeze carries the faint scent of smoke from another fire far off, maybe from a camp hidden along the riverbank. You lift your hand in silent thanks, unsure if anyone sees. In an oral story passed down by tribes of the Great Lakes region, there is a belief that giving aid in winter binds lives together. To share medicine or warmth is to weave a thread of spirit that no storm can break. You think about that as you stand among the trees, the basket of herbs still warm in your memory. As the day fades, you gather more wood and return home. You take another sip of the tea, its warmth steady in your chest. The bitterness no longer bothers you. You place a few of the herbs in a small pouch, promising yourself to plant new ones when the thaw comes. You do not yet know how, but you will learn. The forest outside glows faintly with the last light of the day. You imagine the person who left the basket walking quietly through the snow, vanishing into the trees with the ease of someone who knows every shadow and sound. You wonder if they paused for a moment to look at your cabin, the small curl of smoke from your chimney, the proof that life endures here. By evening, the temperature drops again. You add another log to the fire and sit near it, feeling the day's calm settle over you. The air smells of pine, smoke, and the faint memory of herbs. Your body feels lighter, stronger, as if the forest has adopted you for another day. A traveler once wrote that kindness in the wilderness is rarer than firewood. You think about that line and decide it isn't always true. Sometimes the wild offers compassion in its own quiet ways. A hidden path, a basket of herbs, the taste of a bitter drink that makes your hands stop shaking. Before sleep, you step outside one last time. The sky is deep blue, stars scattered across it like frost. The snow glows faintly, and the air carries the scent of pine smoke from somewhere far away. You close your eyes and whisper, "Thank you, unseen friend." Wind stirs gently, brushing your face like a soft hand before fading back into stillness. Inside, the fire hums low and steady. You lie down, the faint taste of the tea still on your tongue, and let your eyes close. The forest watches in silence as you drift into dreams that smell of wood smoke, sage, and peace. The next morning, your first breath tastes of smoke and pine. The fire has burned low again, but the air in the cabin still carries its warmth. You sit up slowly, stretching stiff muscles, and listen. The wind has died, the world outside resting in that brief, fragile calm that follows heavy weather. You open the door, and light floods in. The forest looks renewed. The snow has settled in smooth waves, untouched and gleaming under the weak Sunday. You take a deep breath, the cold air biting at your lungs, and step outside. For the first time, you notice something you had not before, a faint column of smoke far to the east, rising from between the trees. You smile softly. That must be the neighbors again. The sight of smoke means life. You stand there for a while, watching how it twists and fades against the pale sky. It feels like a mirror of your own chimney, a quiet signal shared between strangers. Then you look at your cabin, its sturdy walls, the marks of your axe still visible, the roof lined with snow but holding strong. For weeks it has been just shelter, but now you see it as something else entirely, a beginning. In the early settlement records, there is mention of how isolated cabins gradually became small communities. It started with one, then two, then five, until the forest was dotted with smoke rising from distant roofs. People would visit when the weather allowed, sharing tools, stories, and seeds. From these gatherings came villages, and from villages came towns. You can almost see that future forming in your mind. You decide to walk toward the other smoke to see who else might be out this morning. The snow crunches beneath your boots, each step releasing a small sigh of air. The forest around you glows faintly gold in the early light. The sound of your own breathing keeps you company. After about half an hour, you see it a line of cabins, smaller than yours but standing close together beside a frozen stream. A man chopping wood near one of the cabins sees you and waves. He calls out a greeting, his voice cheerful and loud enough to echo off the trees. You lift your arm in return, feeling a smile spread across your face. Soon, others step out to see who you are. The man introduces himself as Samuel, his beard flecked with frost and his hands rough from work. His wife, Maria, offers you a mug of something warm that smells faintly of berries. Their children dart between the cabins, bundled in coats far too large for them, their laughter filling the air. The sound warms you more than the drink. Accounts from early communities describe how quickly strangers became essential to one another. A borrowed saw, a shared loaf of bread, or a day's help raising a roof could mean the difference between survival and loss. You see that same spirit here in every movement, every easy word. Samuel leads you to a half-built structure near the stream. Schoolhouse, he says, his voice full of pride. Only one room for now, but it's a start. The word makes you pause. The idea of a school in this wilderness feels almost impossible. Yet here it is, a promise for the next generation, a sign that these people believe in a future beyond mere survival. One of the women nearby is boiling sap over a small fire. The sweet smell drifts through the air. She smiles when she sees you and offers a small wooden spoon. You taste the syrup, warm and rich, and it brings back something you had forgotten: how sweetness can feel like hope. Later, as the group gathers to talk, someone mentions the need for a meeting house once spring arrives, a place for trade and gatherings. You listen quietly, admiring their certainty. They speak of planting, of weddings planned for summer, of letters they hope to send once the trails open. The optimism feels contagious. A note from a missionary in 1819 describes the transformation of such gatherings. One roof of logs becomes 2, then 10, and the wilderness begins to hum with purpose. You hear that hum now, in the chatter around you, in the sound of axes striking wood, in the laughter of children playing near the stream. As the day passes, you help where you can, hauling timber, clearing snow, fetching water from the icy edge of the river. The work feels lighter with others beside you. The rhythm of many hands moving together fills the air with a kind of music. For the first time in months, you hear more voices than the crackle of your fire. When the sun begins to sink, painting the snow in shades of pink and silver, you prepare to leave. Samuel claps your shoulder. "You've got neighbors now," he says simply. His words are both a fact and a comfort. You promise to visit again soon, and he nods, already turning back to his chopping. The walk home feels shorter. The forest, once heavy with silence, now hums faintly with life. The smoke from your chimney greets you as you reach the clearing. The sight of it feels less lonely than before. You step inside, feed the fire, and let the warmth soak into your skin. Scholars often write that community was the frontier's greatest invention. Out of hardship came generosity. Out of solitude came solidarity. You think about that as you sit by your hearth, remembering the laughter, the smell of sap, the feel of rough wood in your hands. Outside, the night falls soft and deep. Through the tiny cracks in the door, you see the glow of distant fires in the east. The thought that others are out there eating, talking, surviving wraps you in quiet reassurance. You whisper into the room, "We are not alone anymore." The fire answers with a single pop, and you close your eyes, smiling as the warmth of both flame and friendship carries you into sleep. When you open your eyes the next morning, the light feels softer, tinted gold through a thin curtain of frost. The fire still glows in the hearth, and the scent of pine smoke lingers in the air. You stretch, feeling the gentle ache of yesterday's labor in your shoulders. The world outside the door is quiet again, though not empty. Somewhere, faintly, you can hear the chopping of wood from your new neighbors. The sound carries through the cold like a heartbeat. You stand and brush frost from your blanket. A strange thought comes to you. The cabin no longer feels temporary. The walls have absorbed your breath, your voice, your warmth. You light another log in the fire and sit for a while, staring at the slow curl of smoke that climbs toward the chimney. The room feels peaceful, almost sacred. Yet, as the days grow shorter again, you sense something shifting. The air at night seems heavier, and the silence outside holds a different kind of weight. Even the wind sounds different, whispering through the trees like words you cannot quite catch. You remember what the older settlers said about this time of year, when the nights stretch longest and imagination grows bold. In the folklore of early pioneers, winter nights were not empty. They were said to belong to spirits, some kind, some mischievous, some drawn by loneliness. Every community had its own names for them. Some families burned an extra candle by the window to guide wandering souls, while others refused to whistle after dark for fear of calling one close. You smile softly, not quite believing but not ready to dismiss the stories either. When evening falls, the sky deepens into indigo, and the first stars flicker faintly through the bare branches. You sit near the fire, carving a small figure from a scrap of wood. The rhythm of your knife against the grain is steady, soothing. Outside, the wind begins to rise. The sound moves through the forest in long sighs, and for a moment it almost sounds like humming. A record from an 1822 preacher's diary mentions that people once lit fires through the night in winter as a sign of faith. He wrote, "The flame reminds the dark that we are not afraid." You glance at your own fire, at how it glows warmly against the walls, and think that maybe faith takes many forms. As the night deepens, you notice something odd. The cabin feels colder, though the fire burns strong. You step to the door and check the latch. It is secure. You listen. Somewhere outside, snow shifts with a slow, deliberate sound. You hold your breath. Then silence. You wait another minute, hearing only the wind again, soft and steady. The sound could be anything: a branch falling, the forest settling. Still, you feel your pulse quicken. In the accounts of old settlers, such moments of unease were common. Isolation makes the mind restless, and every sound becomes a mystery. Some blamed spirits, others blamed memory. One woman in an early Illinois homestead wrote, "The night pressed so close, I thought it was listening." You understand exactly what she meant. You feed the fire a fresh log and sit back down. The small wooden figure in your hand now looks like a bird, rough and uneven. You place it on the mantel beside the dried herbs from your unknown friend and the folded letter from home. The collection feels like a small shrine to everything that has kept you alive: faith, kindness, memory. The wind outside softens again, as if satisfied. The fire crackles gently. You whisper, half to yourself, half to the dark, "If there are spirits out there, keep watch kindly." The air seems to settle after that, the tension easing from the walls. Later, as you lie down, the glow from the hearth paints the room in flickering gold. The shadows move slowly, stretching and shrinking as the fire breathes. Your eyes drift to the small wooden bird, its shape calm and still in the light. The rhythm of the flames begins to lull you towards sleep. Historians who study life on the frontier often say that faith and superstition lived side by side, sharing the same firelight. When the nearest church was 100 miles away, people built their own altars of belief from what they had. You can see how easily it happens. Out here, even the smallest comfort becomes sacred. You dream lightly, half awake, half adrift. In your dream, you stand outside your cabin, the snow glowing pale beneath a full moon. Across the clearing stands a figure cloaked in fur, watching but not approaching. You do not feel fear. The figure nods once, then fades into the trees. When you open your eyes, the fire has burned low, and the night is quiet. You sit up slowly, smiling to yourself. Maybe it was only a dream, or maybe the old stories were right in their own way. The frontier is full of watchers, neighbors, animals, unseen friends. Whatever walked past your cabin tonight, it felt less like a threat and more like a reminder that this world holds more mysteries than you will ever solve. Before dawn, you add one last log to the fire. The wood catches slowly, filling the room with soft orange light. You whisper again, "Watch over this place." Then you rest your head and close your eyes, knowing that even if the world outside remains vast and wild, your small corner of it feels guarded. When the first light of morning slips through the cracks in your cabin wall, you already know something is wrong. Your breath feels heavy, your skin cold despite the fire still burning low. You sit up slowly, a dull ache spreading through your head. The air smells faintly sour, the kind of scent that comes when something in the body has turned against itself. You cough once, and it rattles deep in your chest. You pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders, but the shiver running through you does not stop. Your hands tremble slightly as you stir the fire back to life. For a moment, the world swims out of focus, the light bending strangely. You realize it now. You are sick. Illness is one of the oldest companions of winter. The journals of early settlers describe it in soft, careful words, as if speaking too loudly might invite it inside. Fever, lung sickness, chills that linger for days. The isolation made every cough sound louder. There were no doctors within reach, no herbs unless one knew the forest well, no medicine beyond what people learned from memory or hope. You move slowly, lighting one of your homemade candles. Its light feels softer than the fire, steadier. You sit by it, breathing carefully. The fever rises in waves. Each breath burns. You remember the basket of herbs from your unseen neighbor, the dried leaves tucked carefully beside the hearth. You reach for them now with shaking hands, selecting the willow bark and juniper. You crush them gently in a pot of boiling water, the scent filling the air sharp, bitter, alive. You sip the liquid slowly, grimacing at the taste, but it soothes your throat as it goes down. The warmth spreads through you, leaving a faint trail of calm in its wake. A traveller's account from 1798 tells of a family who survived an outbreak of fever using little more than bark tea and rest. The writer said, "We trusted the forest to remember what we forgot." You think about that as you drink again, wishing for the same mercy. The fever rises higher as the day goes on. You drift in and out of sleep, your thoughts scattered. The walls of the cabin blur at the edges, the sound of the fire growing distant. You see flashes of things, sunlight breaking through the roof, the river glimmering with ice, faces of people you know and some you never met. The line between dream and memory fades. You wake again in twilight. The candle burns low, its wax pooling on the table. Your body feels weaker, but the air in your lungs moves easier now. The herbs must be helping. You reach for your blanket and pull it close, whispering thanks into the dim air. In the distance, through the walls, you hear a faint knocking sound. It is rhythmic, steady. You try to stand, but your legs protest. The sound comes again, 3 knocks, then silence. You manage to reach the door and open it just a little. The cold air rushes in, biting your cheeks. No one stands outside. Only the wind moves, brushing past the doorframe like a ghost. You close the latch again, shaking your head. Maybe it was a dream. Fever plays tricks with the senses. Still, a small part of you imagines the spirits of the forest checking in, curious to see whether you will last another night. The thought is strangely comforting. A faded letter from a pioneer wife describes the same feeling. When illness came, we did not feel alone. The wind itself felt like prayer. You sit again by the fire, holding that image close. The sound of the flames becomes slower, more rhythmic. matching the pace of your breath. Outside, the wind grows stronger. Snow begins to fall again, heavy flakes tumbling against the windows. You feel the fever tugging at your consciousness, pulling you towards sleep. Before you give in, you add one more log to the fire and whisper, "Stay awake for me." You dream again. In this dream, you stand in your cabin doorway, looking out across the snow. A faint glow moves between the trees like candlelight drifting through the forest. You follow it, each step light and soundless. When you reach the river, the glow settles on the water, and for a moment, the ice looks like glass reflecting the stars. You kneel and touch it. The surface feels warm. You wake with a start, the fire still alive beside you. The air feels different now, warmer, easier to breathe. Your fever has broken. You laugh softly, surprised by the sound of your own voice. The sickness has passed, at least for now. Researchers who study early pioneer health often say that survival depended on timing as much as treatment. Those who lasted long enough for their fevers to break often lived to tell the tale. You think about that now, how thin the line is between endurance and loss. You sip the last of your herbal tea, your hands steadier this time. The taste, once bitter, feels almost sweet. You lean back against the wall, staring at the soft glow of the candle. The light flickers gently, and for the first time in days, you feel steady inside your own body. Outside, the wind dies down, and the night settles in calm. The forest seems to rest, its branches heavy with snow. You whisper, a quiet thank you to the unseen hands that guided you through this. Then you lie down, breathing evenly, the warmth of the fire wrapping around you like a blanket. Before sleep claims you, you glance once more at the herbs beside the hearth and the small wooden bird on the mantel. You think of the neighbor who left those gifts, and the strangers who once trusted the forest the same way. "We trusted the forest," you murmur, "and it remembered." The words linger softly in the room as your eyes close. The morning sun creeps gently through the cracks in the wall, painting thin lines of gold across the floorboards. You wake slowly, still weak, but peaceful. The fever has left your body, though a dull heaviness lingers in your limbs. The air feels different today, crisp, but not cruel. The wind outside moves softly, carrying with it the faint crackle of thawing branches. You sit up, wrapped in your blanket, and glance toward the fire. Only grey ash remains, though warmth still clings faintly to the stones. You stir it with a stick and breathe carefully, watching tiny sparks awaken and bloom. The first flame flickers, then catches, growing into a steady glow. For a moment, you simply sit and smile at it. You are alive. The cabin smells of herbs, smoke, and damp wool. You stand slowly, feeling the stiffness in your knees, and move toward the door. When you open it, the sunlight nearly blinds you. Outside, the snow sparkles like powdered glass, and your clearing lies calm beneath a pale blue sky. Your first thought is to check the roof and walls, to make sure the storm caused no damage. Everything seems solid. Then you walk toward the edge of the forest, where the shadows still cling to the snow. You pause there, listening. The forest sounds quieter than usual, subdued, as if holding its breath. Then faintly, you hear it the cry of a bird high above the trees. It echoes sharp and clear, the first sign of movement after days of stillness. You close your eyes and let the sound wash over you. There is something healing about that call, a reminder that life continues even in the heart of winter. The sound stirs something inside you, something that has been silent for too long. You return to the cabin and begin the slow process of rebuilding order. The fever left things scattered. The pot from your tea lies overturned, a pile of wood half frozen near the hearth. You move with purpose, stacking, cleaning, sweeping. The rhythm of work steadies you, grounding you again in the real world. Early frontier journals often describe this stage after sickness as a renewal of faith. People would clean their cabins, wash their bedding, and light candles in gratitude for surviving another winter. One account from 1815 says, "Each morning we woke again, felt like a birth. You feel that same sentiment now, standing in the light that filters through the smoke hole above. Once the chores are done, you step outside again. The air is crisp and quiet. In the distance, you see your neighbor's smoke rising faintly through the trees. It gives you comfort. The memory of those people, the laughter of the children, the warmth of their kindness returns to you now with fresh strength. You decide to visit them tomorrow, to thank whoever left you the herbs. The thought fills you with quiet anticipation. Gratitude is a kind of nourishment too. Later that afternoon, as you chop a few pieces of wood, the axe handle suddenly cracks in your hand. The blade slips and lands harmlessly in the snow, but the noise startles you. For a moment, you simply stare at it, the broken tool lying at your feet. Then you kneel to inspect the damage. The handle has split cleanly down the grain. You will need to carve a new one. There is a lesson in that, you think. Even what keeps you alive will fail eventually. You sit by the stump for a while, letting the sunlight fall across your face. You are too tired to feel frustrated. Instead, you take it as another reminder that survival means constant repair, both of tools and of spirit. A letter from a settler's widow in New Hampshire once described this same quiet resilience. When the axe broke, I bound it with twine and kept cutting, she wrote. When the twine broke, I sang louder. You remember her words as you gather a fresh piece of wood from the pile. You run your hand over it, feeling its roughness, and imagine shaping it into something useful again. By the time evening comes, the forest glows in orange and gold. The air has softened, and the snow around the clearing reflects the firelight like a halo. You cook the last of your cornmeal in a small pot, the smell filling the cabin with warmth. The simple act of eating feels like celebration. Historians who study frontier life often speak of small victories, moments of success that meant more than any grand achievement. Lighting a fire, finding food, seeing smoke from another cabin in the distance. Each of these small things stitched together a life. You understand now that survival was not one great act of courage, but thousands of quiet choices to keep going. When the stars appear, you step outside one last time. The snow gleams under their light, untouched and pure. You breathe deeply, the air cool against your skin, and listen to the stillness. Somewhere far off, an owl calls. Its voice is low, steady, eternal. You turn back toward your cabin, its small window glowing warmly against the dark. You feel a swell of gratitude rise in your chest, not only for the fire and the roof, but for everything that has carried you to this point. The forest, the herbs, the unseen kindness, even the fever itself, all have shaped you into something stronger. Before you go inside, you whisper softly into the cold air, "Thank you for the lesson." The trees stand silent, their branches swaying just enough to sound like acknowledgement. You smile and close the door behind you. Inside, the fire hums quietly, its light steady and sure. You sit beside it, wrapping your blanket around your shoulders. The shadows dance across the logs, and the faint scent of pine fills the air. You close your eyes, letting the warmth sink into you, and think, not for the first time, how the hardest winters can make the most patient hearts. The next day begins in silence, the kind that feels almost deliberate. You open your eyes to the pale shimmer of light sliding across the floorboards. The air is cool but no longer biting. Outside, a thin mist rises from the snow, curling like breath from the earth itself. The worst of winter's anger has passed. What remains is its quiet aftermath. You push open the door and step outside. The snow crunches softly under your boots. The trees drip with melting ice, each drop catching the sunlight and flashing like glass. For the first time in weeks, you can smell the faint scent of soil beneath the snow. It is the smell of thaw, fragile and uncertain, but real. The forest looks different in this new light. Branches that once sagged under heavy snow now sway freely. The sound of water running beneath the ice reaches your ears. You follow it toward the river. The surface, once solid white, has begun to fracture into long dark lines. The cracks glisten, spreading slowly like veins of silver. The thaw brings relief but also danger. Early settlers feared this season almost as much as the storms. Diaries from the 1822 describe mud time, when the ground softened into a treacherous sea of muck that swallowed wagons and boots alike. Cabins shifted, roofs leaked, and paths disappeared. Survival changed shape again, not against the cold, but against the weight of melting water. You kneel by the riverbank and touch the surface. The ice flexes beneath your hand but does not break. You listen to the muffled rush of water below, carrying fragments of branches and leaves downstream. The sound feels alive, impatient, ready to move. Returning to your cabin, you notice small rivulets of water running down from the roof's edge. You fetch your hatchet and dig shallow trenches to guide the melt away from the foundation. The ground squelches underfoot, soft and heavy. Each stroke of your tool sends clumps of wet earth flying. Mud spatters your boots and the lower walls, but you smile. The mess feels like progress. An entry from an early farmer's notebook records that spring cleaning began not from vanity but necessity. When the snow melted, people dug, patched, and drained everything. The thaw revealed what winter had hidden: cracked beams, warped doors, and sometimes graves newly exposed from shallow ground. The frontier was never sentimental about rebirth. It was practical. You admire that honesty. By midday you pause to rest, leaning on your shovel. The sky above has turned a softer shade of blue. The air carries the faintest warmth. A few small birds flit between the trees, their wings flashing grey and brown. Their chirping feels strange at first, almost too bright after months of quiet. You listen with something like awe. You decide to clean the inside of your cabin as well. You open the door wide, letting fresh air flow through. The smell of smoke and pine fills the clearing. You sweep the floor, stack the tools neatly, and shake out your blanket by the doorway. The dust rises and dances in the sunlight like fine snowflakes. For a moment, you stand there, watching the particles glow before they fade. From an old settler's journal comes a phrase that fits this feeling perfectly: spring is not the end of hardship, but the rehearsal for it. You can feel that truth already. The river will flood, the mud will swallow paths, and hunger will test you again before the first green shoots appear. Yet you also feel ready. As the afternoon warms, you sit outside your cabin for the first time in months. The ground is damp, but the sunlight is strong enough to dry your coat. The forest hums faintly, a sound between silence and song. You close your eyes and tilt your face toward the light. The warmth feels like something you had forgotten, something that belongs to you. A folk tradition once held that when a pioneer first felt the spring sun on their face after winter, they should speak a wish aloud. You decide to honor it. You whisper, "Let the land be kind." The words vanish into the soft air, and you watch a breeze stir through the trees as if answering. You spend the rest of the day repairing the roof where the ice tore away a strip of bark. The scent of fresh pine fills the air again as you work. The sound of your hammer echoes across the clearing. Each strike feels rhythmic, steady, alive. By the time the light fades, the roof stands whole once more, glistening with melted frost. As evening comes, the temperature drops again, but not enough to freeze. The river murmurs softly in the distance. The sky glows violet, then deep blue, and a thin crescent moon rises over the treetops. You light your fire and sit just inside the doorway, watching the reflection of its light on wet earth outside. A historian once wrote that the thaw marked not just the change of season but the proof of endurance. Every cabin still standing was a record of human persistence against cold and solitude. You look at your own and understand that sentiment completely. You whisper to yourself, "We made it through." The wind stirs gently, and the trees creak in quiet agreement. You smile, close the door, and return to the warmth. Inside, the The fire hums softly. The air smells clean, alive with the faint scent of mud and sap carried in on your boots. You sit on the floor, cross-legged, and listen to the dripping outside, steady, rhythmic, like a clock counting the seconds between winter and spring. The sound becomes a lullaby, and your eyes grow heavy. Before you drift into sleep, you think of how the world changes slowly, how endurance is measured not by grand moments, but by the gentle patience to begin again each morning. You close your eyes with that thought, the fire whispering quietly beside you, as the earth outside continues to melt and dream of green. The first true thaw comes suddenly. You wake to the sound of dripping everywhere, like 1,000 tiny clocks ticking all at once. The roof releases small slides of snow, the river groans and splits, and even the trees seem to sigh with relief. The air feels damp and heavy with the smell of mud. You open the cabin door and step into a world in motion. The snow around your clearing has turned patchy and thin. Pools of water gather in hollows, reflecting the bright sky. The cold no longer bites but seeps gently, as if testing its own retreat. You stand still for a while, watching the steam rise from the melting drifts, and realize that your first winter on this land has truly ended. You have lived through it. The ground beneath your boots is soft and unsteady, clinging to you with each step. You walk toward the trees, feeling them drip and shiver. Bits of bark peel loose, and under the melting snow you see the dark, rich soil that will soon feed new life. A raven caws overhead, breaking the silence with a voice that sounds both harsh and alive. In the journals of early settlers, the arrival of spring was both joy and labor. One writer called it the season of fixing what the cold forgot to finish breaking. You can see why. The roof still leaks in one corner, the door drags against the frame, and the walls show lines where the clay chinking cracked in the freeze. Yet none of it feels discouraging. These are problems for the living, not for the lost. You decide to start repairs that morning. You mix fresh clay with a little moss and press it into the gaps between the logs. The scent of wet earth fills the air, blending with the smell of thawing pine. You hum quietly as you work, and your breath no longer rises in visible clouds. By midday, the clearing becomes a small sea of mud. Your boots sink deep, each step releasing a soft squelch. You laugh at the sound. A month ago, you feared the cold would kill you. Now you are grateful just to be ankle deep in the living earth again. A faint sound drifts through the forest, the rhythmic creak of wagons. You pause, listening. The neighbors are moving again, the trails open enough to travel. You catch glimpses of distant shapes between the trees, people hauling supplies, leading oxen, calling out in short bursts of laughter. The season of work has returned, and the wilderness is waking. You remember reading once that the first frontier sawmills appeared not long after the first cabins stood. People wanted stronger walls, smoother boards, and roofs that would last. You imagine one of those mills by the river now, its wheel turning in the thawing water, filling the valley with the steady rhythm of progress. By late afternoon, the clouds gather thick and grey. The air smells of rain. You finish patching the last section of wall and stand back to admire it. The cabin looks rough but proud, streaked with mud and marked by use. It has become a living thing, weathered and strong. You light a small fire inside and dry your hands. The rain begins soon after, soft at first, then heavy. It drums on the roof and hisses on the firewood stacked outside. The sound fills the cabin completely. You sit near the hearth, smiling at how different this rain feels from the storms of winter. Then, the water meant danger. Now, it means renewal. Records from frontier towns describe how the first spring rains washed away more than dirt. They washed away fear. One family wrote that they would sit quietly during the first storm, letting the sound of rain remind them that life was beginning again. You understand that sentiment as you listen now. A small stream of water seeps under the door, trickling across the floor. You grab a bucket and place it beneath the leak, laughing softly at the sound of the steady drip. Even imperfection feels gentle today. By evening, the rain slows to a mist. You step outside, breathing deeply. The air is thick with the smell of wet leaves and bark. The ground glistens under the faint light of dusk. The forest, dark and dripping, feels clean again. Every branch, every blade of grass carries a tiny droplet like a jewel. You pick up a handful of damp soil and squeeze it between your fingers. It is cold, but it feels alive. You think of the settlers who came before you, who must have done the same thing at this very moment of the year, checking the ground, dreaming of crops, imagining fields where now only trees grow. A passage from an old farming almanac comes to mind. Spring asks two questions. What will you plant? And what will you keep? You whisper the words to yourself. You know you will not plant much this first year, only what you can tend by hand, but you will keep this place. That much you are sure of. As night falls, fog curls around the cabin like soft breath. You light a candle and set it near the window. The flame glows faintly through the mist, a beacon for anyone still walking the trails in the dark. You watch the light flicker, thinking of those unseen travelers, and hope they find warmth somewhere tonight. Inside, the cabin smells of rain, clay, and smoke. The fire hums low, steady, and patient. You sit cross-legged near it, running your hand over the floorboards. Each groove and mark feels like a page of your story written in wood. You smile to yourself, realizing how far you've come. The rain starts again, soft and steady. You lie back on your blanket, listening to it drum against the roof. The sound is different from snow. It has rhythm, life, and promise. You close your eyes, letting it lull you towards sleep, and think of the world outside waking one drop at a time. When dawn comes, it carries a sound you have not heard in many months. Birdsong. At first it is faint, a single note rising through the mist. Then another joins it, and another, until the forest hums with fragile melody. You sit up slowly, eyes adjusting to the pale gold light streaming through the cracks in the cabin wall. For the first time since autumn, the world feels awake. You open the door and step outside. The air smells of wet bark and new beginnings. The snow has nearly vanished, leaving the ground dark and glossy. Patches of green peek from the earth like small promises. The river runs freely now, its voice louder, fuller. You walk toward it, boots sinking slightly in the soft mud. The sound of rushing water feels like music, low and constant, wrapping the whole valley in its rhythm. You crouch near the riverbank, watching the current carry bits of ice away. Your reflection shimmers on the surface, blurred but recognizable. You have changed. Your beard is thicker, your face leaner, your eyes steadier. You look older, though not in a way that feels sad. The wilderness has carved something new into you, something calm. A line from a settler's journal drifts through your thoughts. Spring did not forgive us. It tested us again in gentler ways. You smile at that. The cold may be gone, but new work waits at every corner. The thaw has revealed fallen branches, cracked timbers, and patches of soggy earth that need tending. Survival continues, just wearing a softer face. You decide to build a small fence today, something to mark the edges of your clearing and keep wandering animals from your food stores. You gather branches, trimming and sharpening them with your hatchet. The smell of fresh wood fills the air. Birds flit nearby, curious, their wings flashing silver in the morning light. You drive the stakes into the soft soil, each thud sinking deep. The sound echoes between the trees, steady and sure. Sweat runs down your neck despite the cool breeze, but the labor feels good. There is a rhythm to it, a conversation between effort and earth. Records from early settlers mention that spring work often began with boundaries, fences, paths, or simple markers, not for ownership, but for comfort. To carve order into the wild was to remind the mind that it still belonged to something human. You understand that instinct completely. The small square of land you enclose feels like a heartbeat drawn into the ground. At midday, you rest beside the river, eating a few dried apples from your last supply. Their sweetness tastes brighter now, perhaps because hunger no longer sharpens every bite. The sound of the river lulls you. You lean back against a log, feeling sunlight warm your face. For a moment, you close your eyes and simply listen to the rush of water, the chirping of birds, the faint creak of the trees. Life hums quietly all around you. A memory surfaces. Your first days here, when silence was your only companion. Back then, every noise made you reach for your axe. Now, those same sounds feel like company. You smile at how your mind has changed, how fear has softened into awareness. By afternoon, clouds gather again, but not the grey masses of winter. These are softer, brighter, drifting lazily across the sky. A warm wind moves through the clearing, carrying the scent of earth and sap. You can almost taste the coming season. You decide to check your traps near the forest's edge. The snow there has melted into deep mud, and your boots sink with every step. Two of the traps are empty, but the third holds a rabbit, quick and healthy. You whisper, "Thanks," and end its struggle swiftly, the way you were taught. As you carry it home, you feel no guilt, only gratitude. In the writings of early frontier preachers, you once read a reflection that said, "Each life taken fed another, and in that exchange was sacred order." You think of that as you prepare the meat by your cabin, using every part you can. Nothing is wasted. The bones will strengthen the soil when the time for planting comes. As the sun lowers, your fence stands complete. It is uneven and rough, but solid. You run your hand along the wood, proud of its stubbornness. The wind rushes through it with a low hum, as if approving. The sight of it fills you with quiet satisfaction. You have taken another step toward belonging. Evening drifts in slowly. The sky turns soft pink, and the river glows with the fading light. You cook the rabbit over the fire, the scent rising into the air like a message to the forest. When you take the first bite, the flavor feels like more than food it tastes, of endurance, of months of hunger and hope converging into one simple, perfect meal. An old folk saying claimed that the first spring meal taken outdoors made the soul stronger. You eat slowly, watching the last of the sunlight slip behind the trees. The warmth of the fire and the steady rush of the river blend into one sound, gentle and familiar. As night settles, you lean against the cabin wall, staring up at the stars. The air feels different now, no longer hostile. The same forest that once threatened to bury you now feels like a guardian. You can sense the earth waking under your feet, restless with life that has waited for months. You whisper quietly, "It's starting again." The words drift into the night, carried by the wind toward the river, toward the dark silhouettes of trees. You close your eyes, listening to the rustle of branches and the soft crackle of the fire. The rhythm of the thaw fills your ears. You stay awake for a while, not out of fear but gratitude. The night no longer feels endless. It feels alive. When sleep finally comes, it comes easily, like water finding its way home. When you wake, sunlight is pouring through the doorway in a bright golden stream. The air carries a warmth that feels unfamiliar after so many months of frost. You step outside barefoot, the ground damp but soft beneath your feet. The smell of earth is thick and sweet. Every sound, from the buzz of insects to the faint splash of a river, seems amplified as if the world itself is stretching after a long sleep. You look up. The trees are budding. Tiny green leaves shimmer like small coins in the morning light. You can almost hear them unfurling. The forest, once skeletal and grey, is coming alive again. The first true spring has arrived. You stand in the clearing for a long while, breathing in the air. Somewhere above you, a woodpecker drums on a hollow trunk. A squirrel darts between branches, scattering droplets of melting ice. The sight fills you with quiet wonder. Months ago, you could not imagine warmth returning. Now it feels like the most natural thing in the world. Early settlers often described the first spring after surviving their first winter as the second birth. Diaries from the 1800s mention tears of relief when the ground softened enough to dig again. You understand that feeling now. The forest no longer feels indifferent. It feels generous. You spend the morning cleaning the last traces of winter from your cabin. The ashes from the hearth are swept outside, scattered across the muddy ground to feed future growth. You roll up your blanket and hang it near the door to air out. Each small task feels symbolic, as though you are shedding a layer of hardship. By midday, the sun shines high and warm. You remove your coat and hang it on a peg. For the first time in months, your arms feel light. You sit on a log near the door, sharpening your knife while listening to the steady rush of the river. A bird lands nearby, cocking its head at you. Its feathers flash yellow against the blue sky. You smile and whistle softly, and to your surprise, it answers. A curious entry from a frontier naturalist's journal notes that birds were often the settlers' first companions after isolation. Their songs filled the empty spaces in the mind left by silence. Some pioneers even gave them names and waited for their return each year. You decide that if this small yellow bird stays, you will call it Finch. The warmth encourages you to start something new. You decide to plant a few seeds near the edge of your clearing: wild beans, a handful of corn kernels saved from autumn, and a few dried peas given by your neighbors during winter. The soil is damp and rich under your hands. You dig with a small wooden tool, the scent of earth rising around you. As you work, you remember the farming manuals you once read. They always spoke of patience. Plant in hope, not haste, one said. You press each seed gently into the soil, covering it with care. The gesture feels like a prayer. A passage from an early settler's letter drifts into your memory. We plant what we may never live to harvest, and yet we plant all the same. You pause at that thought, hand still resting on the earth. Maybe that is the essence of survival, to build for a future that may not yet see you in it. When the last seed is buried, you sit back and wipe your hands on your trousers. The ground looks plain, only faint mounds marking your work, but you can already imagine what it will become. Small shoots, green and stubborn, pushing through the soil toward the Sunday. You whisper to the earth, "Grow well." The afternoon brings the faint smell of smoke from the east. You walk toward the rise, overlooking the valley, and see your neighbor's chimneys puffing again. Children's laughter drifts faintly through the trees. The sight brings you comfort. You are no longer the lone survivor of the cold. You are part of something living. You walk back slowly, collecting a few sticks along the path for tonight's fire. The sky is streaked with soft white clouds. The air feels heavy with warmth and possibility. When you reach your cabin, the sunlight hits the walls in glowing ribbons. You run your fingers along the rough logs and smile. They have darkened from smoke and age, but still stand solid and strong. Inside, the cabin smells clean now: earth, wood, and faint sweetness from the herbs that hang near the fire. You light a small flame, not for heat this time, but for companionship. The smoke curls lazily upward, leaving thin trails that catch the sunlight. Historians often say that this season, when the thaw turned to planting, marked the moment settlers began to dream rather than merely endure. You can feel that shift inside yourself. Fear has given way to calm, exhaustion to rhythm. The cabin that once sheltered you from death now holds the shape of a life beginning to form. Evening comes gently, the sky glowing orange and violet. You step outside again, bare feet sinking into the damp ground. The air hums with insects. The forest smells green, alive, endless. You hear the river in the distance, a low whisper blending with the rustle of leaves. You sit by your small patch of earth, watching the last light fade. The seeds lie hidden beneath the soil, silent but full of promise. You think of how everything you have built, your walls, your fire, your roof, began the same way, as something buried in effort and hope. You whisper softly, "We begin again." The words drift into the dark like a vow. The first stars appear above the trees, shimmering faintly in the cool night. You stay there until the air cools and your eyelids grow heavy. Then you return to your cabin, where the fire glows quietly, waiting. You lie down with the scent of earth still on your hands. The sound of night birds fills the silence, their calls weaving through your dreams. Sleep comes easily, gentle and deep, carrying you forward into the bright season that is only just beginning. The next morning greets you with light so bright it spills across your floor like water. You blink against it, stretching, the sound of birdsong drifting through the open cracks in the wall. The air feels soft, almost playful. You can hear the steady hum of insects outside, the chatter of the river, and somewhere far off, a child's laughter carried by the breeze. The world that was once frozen solid now sings with motion. You stand, push open the door, and breathe deeply. The smell of new grass mixes with the fading memory of snow. The sky is vast and blue, streaked with thin white clouds drifting lazily. The forest has turned from grey to green in a matter of days. You feel the change not just in the air, but in your chest, like a weight lifting. Your small garden plot looks the same as yesterday, just a patch of dark earth, but you kneel beside it anyway. You touch the soil, still cool but softer now. For a moment, you think you see the faintest hint of something pushing upward, though it may only be wishful thinking. Still, you smile. Hope is a seed too. You decide to visit your neighbors. It has been several weeks since you last saw them, and the thaw has made the paths easier to travel. You pack a small bundle of gifts, a carved wooden bird for the children, a few candles from the last batch you made, and one of your dried herbs as thanks for the basket that once saved your life. The trail through the forest feels different now. Sunlight filters through new leaves, dappling the path with moving gold. The ground squishes beneath your boots, soft but steady. Birds swoop overhead, and a pair of rabbits dart across your way before vanishing into the underbrush. The sound of running water grows louder as you approach the small cluster of cabins by the river. The settlement is livelier than you remember. Smoke rises from chimneys, and people move between the cabins carrying baskets, tools, and buckets. Children chase one another through puddles, splashing mud onto their clothes. You hear laughter everywhere, and the sound makes your chest ache with something like joy. Samuel spots you first, waving with a grin. "Thought we lost you to the snow," he calls, his voice cheerful. You laugh, shaking his hand firmly. "Almost," you answer, "but the fire held." He nods approvingly and gestures toward the others. Maria comes out carrying a loaf of bread still warm from the oven, its crust dark and fragrant. You sit with them by the riverbank, sharing stories as you eat. The bread tastes like sunlight, soft and full of life. You pass your small gifts to them, embarrassed at their simplicity, but Maria smiles and sets one of your candles on the table at once. "We'll light it tonight," she says softly. A young woman joins you, carrying a bundle of wild herbs. She introduces herself as Alina, one of the newer arrivals. When you thank her for the medicine that healed your fever, she nods shyly but does not speak. There is something calm and knowing in her eyes. You realize she must have been the one who left the basket at your door. Gratitude tightens your throat for a moment, and all you can manage is a quiet, "You saved me." Early settlers often wrote of this kind of quiet generosity. Survival was never solitary, no matter how wide the wilderness. Every life was a web of unseen hands, someone mending a door, leaving food, offering a word of advice. You understand now how these simple gestures wove the fabric of a future community. The day drifts into afternoon. You help Samuel repair a wagon wheel, the smell of sap and oil thick in the air. Children watch, fascinated, while Maria hums softly as she kneads more dough. The rhythm of life here feels both fragile and unbreakable. Every voice, every sound, every heartbeat seems part of a shared song. A note in an early homestead record once described spring gatherings like this as the rebuilding of voices. After a winter spent surviving in silence, people relearned how to speak freely, how to laugh, You feel that same renewal now, the hum of belonging settling into your bones. When the work is done, you join the others by the fire outside one of the cabins. The flames dance low, their light reflecting in the river nearby. Someone passes you a tin cup filled with cider, and the warmth spreads through you as you sip. A few of the older settlers tell stories, some true, some clearly embellished. One man swears he saw a bear steal a pot of honey and walk upright into the woods. Laughter ripples through the group. As the stars appear, Maria lights your candle and places it on a flat stone beside the fire. Its small flame glows steady, flickering gently in the night breeze. The others grow quiet, watching it. There is something sacred about that moment, one small light, born from survival, now shared among friends. You sit in silence, feeling the warmth of the fire on your hands and the cool of the night on your back. The river murmurs nearby, steady as a heartbeat. The candle burns low, but its glow remains strong. You think of how far you have come since the days when silence meant fear. Now it feels like peace. Before you leave, Samuel presses a small sack of seeds into your hand. For the next season, he says simply. You nod, too moved to speak. The gesture feels heavier than words. It is trust made tangible, the promise of another cycle, another chance. You walk home by moonlight, the forest bright with silver light. The air hums with frogs and the rustle of small animals. When you reach your clearing, your cabin stands quiet, its roof gleaming faintly under the stars. You light a new fire and place your candle beside it, letting its last glow mix with the flames. You sit for a long while, watching the two lights dance together. Your world feels larger tonight, connected by threads of warmth that stretch through the dark woods to other fires, other hearts. You whisper softly, "We are no longer alone." Then you let the sound of the night carry your words away. Sleep comes gently, and this time you dream not of storms but of open fields, full of light and song. The sun rises early now, spreading a soft gold glow across the clearing. You wake to its warmth on your face, blinking against the light that filters through the cracks in the wall. Outside, birds fill the air with their endless chatter, the forest alive with motion. The long shadow of winter has faded completely. Every sound, every scent, every breath feels lighter. You push open the door, the hinges groaning softly, and step into the morning. The grass, still damp with dew, sparkles under the Sunday. The air smells of wet soil and blooming buds. You hear the river in the distance, stronger now, its rhythm constant. You close your eyes for a moment and let the sunlight rest on your skin. The cold season feels like another lifetime. Your small garden has changed overnight. Tiny green shoots have broken through the soil, fragile yet defiant. You kneel beside them, brushing the dirt lightly from their leaves. The sight fills you with quiet awe. These are the first living things you have grown here, the first proof that this land now answers your care. In the journals of early farmers, there are countless notes about this moment. The first sprout makes a believer of any skeptic, one wrote. You understand that now. These plants are not just food, they are faith made visible. You spend the morning tending them, pulling stray weeds and turning the soil around the roots. The sun warms your back, and the work feels gentle compared to the harsh tasks of winter. You hum softly as you work, a habit that has lingered from those long, silent nights when song was your only company. Afterward, you take a walk down to the river. The ground squelches beneath your boots, but the air is sweet and filled with promise. The river has grown wide and fast from the meltwater, its surface glimmering in the light. You crouch and watch small fish dart beneath the surface. For a moment, you see your reflection ripple and break apart, replaced by the movement of water. You smile to yourself, thinking how fitting it is that the land has learned to reflect life again. At the far edge of the bank, you spot a few of your neighbors. Samuel is helping his eldest son repair a fishing net, while Maria kneels by the water washing clothes, her sleeves rolled to the elbow. You wave, and she waves back. her face bright with a spring smile. She calls out, "You'll come tonight, won't you?" You frown for a moment. Then remember it's the gathering they mentioned, the first of the season, to mark the turning of winter into growth. You nod, and she laughs. "Bring something warm to drink." These gatherings were part of every settlement's rhythm. Historical accounts describe them as celebrations of survival, moments to remember what was endured and what was yet to come. Some called them thaw feasts, others return nights. The names hardly mattered. What mattered was that people came together again after the silence. You spend the rest of the day preparing for it. You take your last candle, the one you promised to save for the thaw, and trim the wick. You boil a small pot of sweetened water with the last of your dried fruit, letting it steep until it fills the cabin with a faint golden fragrance. The smell reminds you of summer long before you ever saw this land. By dusk, you walk toward the river settlement again. The air is warm, carrying the scent of pine smoke and bread. The path is lit by small fires burning along the way, flickering like amber eyes in the trees. When you arrive, the clearing is alive with sound voices, laughter, the soft rhythm of a fiddle someone has brought out of storage. Children dance in circles near the water, their laughter ringing through the dusk. You sit with Samuel and Maria near the central fire. A pot of stew bubbles gently beside the flames. The warmth from the fire touches your face, and you feel an ache of contentment. The neighbors pass around bowls, mugs, and stories. Someone sings an old song from across the sea, slow and wistful, and for a few moments, every voice joins in the chorus. A traveler's journal from 1803 describes these moments as the first proof that joy could grow from the same ground that held our fear. You think about that line as you look around. The people here are worn but shining. Their laughter rises above the crackle of flames, their faces golden in the light. The forest, once so full of silence, now hums with human sound. Later, as the night deepens, Maria brings out a small loaf of bread and breaks it into pieces, passing them around the circle. "To spring," she says, her voice steady, "to the living, and to those who taught us how." The words hang in the air, gentle but powerful. You feel them settle into your heart like warmth spreading from the fire itself. You take a piece and lift your cup. "To endurance," you add softly. A murmur of agreement moves through the group. For a moment, everyone falls silent, gazing into the flames as if they can see all the winters behind them and all the summers ahead. The stars appear slowly above the clearing. The air cools but remains kind. You lean back on your hands, feeling the damp grass beneath your palms, and watch the embers rise into the night. The sound of the fiddle starts again, slow and sweet, and the children resume their dance. You find yourself smiling without realizing it. When the gathering ends, you walk home in quiet peace. The forest is still, except for the faint murmur of frogs by the river. The moonlight pools between the trees, silver and soft. You carry the last of your candlelight in a tin holder, its small flame swaying with your steps. Your cabin waits ahead, warm and familiar. When you step inside, you set the candle on the table and let it burn down to the last inch. You sit in its glow, thinking of all that has changed. The cold that once ruled this place has faded, but its memory has not. It has shaped you into someone who can meet warmth without taking it for granted. You whisper to the fading flame, "We have learned how to live." The wick glows red, then dies into a curl of smoke. You smile, stretch out near the fire, and close your eyes, knowing that the hardest chapter has ended and a gentler one has begun. The morning air carries the scent of wet grass and wildflowers. You wake slowly, your body loose, the sound of the river outside, soft and steady. The sunlight filtering through the cracks paints golden ribbons across your blanket. For a long time, you simply lie there, breathing in the peace that fills your cabin. It is strange to think that the same place once echoed with the chill of fear. Now it hums quietly with life. You rise, stretch, and open the door. The clearing before you glows under the early light. Dew clings to every blade of grass. The small patch of crops by your cabin has grown. Tiny green leaves tremble in the breeze. You walk barefoot to them, kneel, and touch the cool earth. The soil feels warm beneath your fingertips, soft and full of promise. A bluebird lands on a branch nearby, singing a clear, bright note. You smile and hum along without thinking. The tune feels like a memory from another life, though you cannot recall where you first heard it. The bird hops closer, bold and curious. You whisper, "Stay as long as you like." You look around the clearing and see how much has changed. The fence stands firm, weathered but solid. The chimney leans slightly but still sends up a steady curl of smoke. The logs of the cabin are darkened by sun and rain, but they gleam faintly in the morning light. You built this. You made a home where there was once only cold and emptiness. Frontier records often describe this moment of stillness, the pause between survival and the next challenge. "We had learned to breathe again," one settler wrote. You feel that truth as the air moves gently through your hair. The wind carries warmth instead of threat. After breakfast, you walk down to the river to fetch water. The surface shimmers, and small fish flash beneath it. You cup your hands and drink, the water cold and sweet. Across the bank, the trees sway slowly, their leaves whispering together like a conversation you are almost able to understand. You notice that your reflection looks different now. The fear that once clung to your face has faded. What remains is something quieter, steadier. The river has seen you in every season, building, freezing, fighting, resting, and still it runs beside you. In an old letter written by a settler to her sister back east, she said, "The land taught us patience, and in return it forgave us." You feel that forgiveness now, in the gentle bend of the trees, in the softness of the soil beneath your feet. You no longer fight this place. You move with it. When you return to the cabin, the smell of wood smoke greets you. You sit by the door with your back against the wall, watching the sunlight climb higher. The forest hums faintly in the distance, frogs, birds, and the buzz of insects blending into one song. The stillness no longer feels like solitude. It feels like belonging. You think of your neighbors by the river, their laughter still echoing faintly from last night. You think of Alina's quiet kindness, of Samuel's easy strength, of Maria's smile as she passed you bread. These people are the threads that now tie you to this land. You are not just surviving beside them, you are part of something that will grow long after your hands are gone from the soil. Scholars writing about early America often say that community was the first real crop ever planted here. It grew from shared firelight, from simple acts of care, from the habit of checking on one another when the snow piled high. You smile, remembering how a stranger's basket of herbs once pulled you back from fever. That too was a kind of planting. The sun climbs higher, warming your skin. You can hear distant chopping, someone splitting wood already, getting ready for the next turn of the seasons. The work never ends, but now it no longer feels like struggle. It feels like rhythm. You spend the afternoon tending your plants, mending a loose board near the door, and cleaning the small tools that once felt like lifelines. Each scrape of your knife, each soft brush of soil, carries a quiet gratitude. As the day fades, you light one more fire, not for warmth, but to watch the flames dance. The sky turns violet, then deep blue. The first stars appear, their light reflecting off the slow, dark river. The air cools, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. You listen to the chorus of frogs, steady and calm. A passage from a traveller's diary returns to you. The fire spoke softly to the ones who had endured. You lean forward and listen, and it feels as if the flames truly are speaking to you, to the land, to all those who came before and built their small lives out of smoke, wood, and hope. When the embers begin to fade, you lie down near the hearth. The glow touches the walls gently, painting everything in amber light. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. Your body feels tired but strong, your heart quiet but full. Outside, The forest rustles. You imagine your little garden growing, the river carrying whispers downstream, the stars reflecting on its surface. You think of the first night you arrived here, cold and uncertain, and how far that moment now feels. The wilderness that once tested you has become your companion. You whisper one last thought into the dim room. We made a life.